Constellation is brought to you by Factor. With Factor, you can save that extra trip to the grocery store and all the chopping, prepping, and cleaning up too, while still getting the flavor and nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes. Head to factormeals.com/con50 and use code CON50 to get 50% off. That's code CON50 at factormeals.com/con50 to get 50% off.
Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast, is brought to you by you. If you want to learn how to support our podcast network, head to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined, as always, by my brother Dagan Moriarty, repping the homeland on his shirt today. How are you today, my friend?
Very nice. I like your shirt, man. I feel like I want this graphic on that color. That's my blue. I call that royal blue, but that's maybe not royal blue.
Yeah, I don't know. I also am using like a 1080p web camera, so who the hell knows like what's picking up? But
it's some sort of blue.
But this is one of the shirts. The guy that makes me my custom T-shirts, my friend that makes me all my custom one-off graphic tees, sent me a slate. This was like months ago, so I have to still get back to him. But a slate of new shirts that I can get things printed on because I want to go up a size because I've always worn medium basically I feel like my whole life, and I'm really just pushing the exact, like it can't happen. I can't wear medium shirts anymore. Dude, I have shirts. Like I used to have a Houston Astros shirt I wore in college where I don't even know how I wore this thing at all. Like it's a complete belly shirt. So anyway, that's where this shirt comes from. And it's one of my very rare blank shirts because it's a sample. So
gotcha.
Because I feel like it's a waste to wear a plain shirt. I hate wearing plain shirts, but I'm at the bottom of my laundry here. I mean, I don't know what that means either. I have fucking 800 t-shirts. But anyway, it's good to see you, my friend. Welcome to the show.
Good to see you guys.
Gene Park, how are you today, my friend? We have 3/4 of punching up today. That's exciting.
We do.
So you guys are very used to doing shows together. Gene, it's good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Good. Just ending a long week. Just catching up on a lot of articles over the Washington Post. I'm just happy to be back on Stelly. It's been a minute, so
yeah, welcome back. Good to see you. And finally, last but not least, Micah Watson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. This is a very special episode because we have dogs in here with us today.
Yeah,
we usually don't have the dogs in the office, but Colin has Rush. I have Treble. She's meandering around right now. And we're going to hope that she stays fairly well behaved throughout the whole episode. We'll see.
Yeah, she goes goblin on goblin mode all the time. She's crazy. Rush is just, they're confused why they're up here with us.
Well, why are they?
But, I'll tell you because we're having work done in and around the house. So we got the garage. We got like ridiculous shelving put in the garage for the new merch shop or the expanding merch shop that Micah's heading up with gratuitous levels of almost fascistic branding on it, with a logo on every door. And it's Trebby Pup. And so they were doing that, and then they were moving inside because this dog here, Treble, when we got her, literally any corner downstairs of wood. So the corners of our kitchen island, the corners of the baseboards, all the rest, she destroyed all of them by biting on them over time. So this is when she was a little pup. So we've invited the people so they did the shelving. Now they're inside fixing all of the molding, extensive level of molding damage that Treble did in here. And then they're going to finish that next week. And then they go into the backyard and they put in a new floodlight because you can't see a goddamn thing back there. Tell you that much. So we got to just get it over with. Let's go. Let's get it done.
Yeah. And I want to say too, the reason she started chewing the molding, it all happened when I took like a 5-day trip to Buffalo for a funeral. And like the first 3 days, she was okay. Like she had Colin and Rush, she was fine. And then like she just kind of snapped and started to panic. And one day Colin came downstairs and she had just started chewing all the molding. So it was like she was doing okay, but something happened where she like must have thought I was never coming back. And that's when she just went nuts. But then what happened was I, came home from my, trip. I'd go grocery shopping. I'd come back. She had like freaked out again and chewed more molding. That happened for a long time of like every time I left the house, she'd chew on something. She doesn't do it anymore, though. It's been several months since she's chewed on any of it, which is why we're now fixing it, because we think she's
safe.
finally understanding that I'm coming home whenever I leave the house.
Yeah, we have the center, we have an open concept house. So, and you've been in it, Dake. So downstairs, like in this huge open concept, there's a large island, like a kitchen island with a sink, and it's a granite and all. It's beautiful. And she just destroyed all the corners of that. Like that made me want to be like, I can't have anything nice. I can't have anything nice.
Did you put less delicious molding up? I hope, because don't knock it till you try it.
Yeah,
That's shit.
Rush behind Micah. You can't really see it because of the camera angle, but he used to be up here with me all the time when it was just me and him, and he basically ate an entire windowsill, like the entire thing. It's gone. So they have to replace that as well. So there's a lot of, in other words, that's why the pups are here with us today. But
nice.
It's good to be here with you guys today. Thank you all out there for joining us for Constellation. We enjoy talking to you about a bunch of random topics, and we have some interesting ones to go through this week. I think we have interesting topics every week, but I really do like this combination of topics very much. So, Gene, I wanted to start with you, if that's okay.
Okay. Wow.
I thought this was a timely and interesting topic, and perhaps it always is, but I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, my topic today is how social media has affected our lives. Very broad topic, I know. And I mean, the part of the reason why I chose it was, it's something I've always had in my chamber for a bit, because there's always something to talk about. And the impact of social media is ongoing. And I think, especially even with this group of eclectic people, I think we get some interesting stories, Colin's career has been made out of social media. My career has been made out of social media. Micah met Colin through social media. But who knows? Maybe Micah was like an Instagram celebrity back where she was from or something. I only discovered her YouTube channel, and I loved her content. So who knows what else Micah has been in the past. And Dakin, I don't know how active Dakin is on social media, but you got kids. You got to worry about that, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And then for me, social media has been inseparable from my life. I'm 42 years old, right? So I'm definitely at the edge. I'm definitely of that generation. I think Colin and I are both of the generation that remembers half of our lives without the internet. At least probably a good third, or maybe a good chunk of the beginning without the internet, and then afterwards where we just can't live without it. But for me, my interaction with social media began on Guam, and we can go about Guam. We'll factor in a later topic later this episode. But in Guam, I was in a chat room. There was only one chat room for the entire island nation, and I was part of it. And I eventually became moderator, and I was 16 years old. I started chatting when I was 15, but then I got assigned becoming a mod at 16. So I think a lot of people might relate to that, because a lot of mods in Twitch chats right now are quite young too. But this was me being the mod for the entire island of Guam, So I was the mod for a lot of older people too. And this was really around the time I started drinking, because a lot of the folks in the chat room were older. They were in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, and they were all going to bars, and they wanted to meet up. You would have meetups, internet meetups, right? That was always the thing back in the past, and still is now. Obviously, it just completely normalized, and even cons are basically internet meetups, right? You would think. But back then, people just wanted to meet up. So I would start arranging these meetups in bars, and that was what really got me into the bar scene. And that's how I really got to know how the bar business runs, how promoters work, how it was really my first contact with event organization. And also it was really the start of how I started to realize the power of the internet, because these were all youngish people. They're probably all dead by now, who knows? But because these were all youngish people going out and drinking and sleeping with each other and everything, I started really getting to know and understand the rumor mill and how information spreads on the internet. And that was really kind of where I started to really think about misinformation on the internet, really at a young age, you know. I was like, that's not true. That's not happening. Why is this? Why is everyone saying this? This is crazy. But it's like you realize you have no control over it, and it just spreads like wildfire. It was really like the first time I was seeing like a digital wildfire in real life. That whole experience was interesting because because I was 16, I was it's Guam, so I think the legal age of consent was 16. And yeah, I got into a lot of relationships that I probably shouldn't have. That they probably shouldn't have been chasing with me, but they did anyways. Um, it was really the first time it was my first time in high school. My first time experiencing an intramarital relationship was in high school.
Wow.
I was seeing somebody who was married.
Intramarriage.
Yeah, a marital relationship or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's called an entanglement.
Entanglement, yes, as Will Smith and Jada Pinkett
Well
Smith would call it. So I was entangled in some relationships when I was young too, and then in college, I wasn't really that into social media. It was, the internet was burgeoning, and we started getting into memes and everything. I remember the meme guy and the Star Wars kid, all of that stuff was really popping up, but there was no real like interaction between social media. MySpace didn't really pop off until right after I finished college around 2003. And then, of course, Facebook didn't really start until shortly afterwards. But I joined MySpace pretty quickly after college. It was a good way to keep in touch with people. And, again, I was still fascinated by internet and the way we present ourselves as people. Again, that chat room, so many people were different things to so many people. So you would meet them in real life. Like I got catfish when I was 16, 17 too. This was before that phrase even became like a thing, like girls were misrepresenting themselves, sending me pictures of someone else, and I'll go on a date with them, and I'll just be like, what the fuck is this? And like I was in high school, so I took them to fucking McDonald's. Who cares, But yeah, on MySpace, I got a MySpace. Had a lot of friends there, and then when Facebook came out, this is when Facebook was only for the colleges, and I just took one look at Facebook, and I was like, this is the future right here. I knew that Facebook had done something that MySpace wasn't doing. The ability to comment on other people's timelines, to fucking post photo albums. That shit was crazy back in the day. So I was like, I need to get on Facebook. I was calling my old college, Fullerton, to ask them to give me like a .edu address so I can sign up for Facebook. And they were like, no, you graduated. What are you talking about? And like, can't you give me like an alumni.edu? And they're like, we don't have that. And I'm like, fuck, So when Facebook finally opened up to the public, I signed up immediately. I was like, this is the future right here.
You can't be here, old man.
Huh? Exactly. What are you doing here? You're 25 years old.
Yeah, get out of here. Get
out of here, you old, you ancient person. But yeah, so I got on Facebook, and then Twitter started, and Twitter was really as many people know, I'm pretty well known on Twitter, but I started back on Twitter in 2008, and I was already a reporter, and I really started to think early on about how social media could serve journalism and serve, again, the spread of information, correct information, right? So I was really like the first social media reporter in Hawaii, in the entire state of Hawaii. This was like long after I left Guam and I moved to Hawaii, and I started tweeting like. I covered crimes. I covered, public safety. I covered like court hearings. So a lot of times whenever I was at a murder scene or a traffic accident or at a court trial, I'd be tweeting out all the details. And that's how I got known in Hawaii. They were like, oh, you're on Twitter. You should follow Gene Park. He's telling everybody about what's going on in the freeway. Or when there was like a tsunami warning, like I was literally at the fucking beach, like waiting for the water to hit me, and I was like live tweeting that, and that was like the point when like the New York Times like started noticing me, and it was around then when I started to realize I could use social media again to present myself in a certain way, and hopefully present myself in a good way where I'm like using information, in a clever way, in an innovative way that someone like the Washington Post or the New York Times would hire me. And then I got laid off, and then I got hired back on again. But I really became Hawaii's first social media editor or community manager, like digital community manager, back in like 2012 when I started working for Civil Beat. Civil Beat is a small nonprofit investigative journalism outlet founded by the billionaire Pierre Omidyar. And if you're not,
that's the guy from Glenn Greenwald's old website.
Yes. So he's the reason why Glenn Greenwald is a millionaire in the first place, because he basically started The Intercept.
The Intercept, that's
Glenn,
what it is.
Right? And then Glenn and him or whatever just parted ways, and Glenn decided to move to Brazil and do whatever he's doing right now, and ran off with his money. But before The Intercept, before Glenn, it was Civil Beat. And that was kind of like his start in journalism. And we were only a digital only website. And they were started with the philosophy of being really social first and digital first, and really engaging with folks. But they never really had someone like that. So they later contacted me. This was after I left journalism, and I was actually doing public relations. Again, my life is like so many different like hats. I'm wearing so many different hats. But this is when I was doing public relations, and then they reached out to me and said, "Hey, we hear that you're actually like the best person for social media in Hawaii." And I had that reputation, when Uber was starting up in Hawaii, the company Uber contacted me directly and said, "Hey, can you help us with the launch of this new service?" And I was like, what is it? And I was like, you can call cars on your phone. And I'm like, why wouldn't you just call a taxi? And they're like, wait, because it's an app. It's just more convenient. And I'm like, okay, well, how much is it? It's like, it's more expensive than cabs. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? What the fuck are you talking about? But this was when Uber was only a luxury car service.
Yeah, black car. Yeah.
This is only a black car service. So I said, why not? I'll help you out, Uber. And I started spreading the word about Uber. I started letting people know in Hawaii what Uber is. I started to become like an influencer on Uber. They gave me a year-long free ride pass for Uber. So I actually had a driver, Linda, and she was great. She had an Escalade. And oh my god, dude, like this was so good for like the dating scene when like nobody knew what the fuck Uber was. So I would just be like at like a dinner, and I was like, let me just call my car, and then Linda with her fucking big black Escalade would just show up, and like everybody would be like, who are you? What is going on? What kind of magic is this? I was like a fucking wizard, It was amazing. And then of course now everyone knows where it was, but it was really, really fun to be in the early days of that and just kind of show off this new app or whatever. I didn't even think it would work anyways, but I was just in it for the money and for the work. But going back again to Civil Beat, they wanted to hire me because they heard I was the best in social media. I was like, yeah, sure, totally. And then my work in Civil Beat really helped my career. I was able to do a lot of like good work in that company, and that was the work that got me hired at the Washington Post. And again, I was a social media editor at the Washington Post. A lot of people think that I've just been covering games or whatever at the Washington Post for like how many years, but it's like, no, for the first 5 years of my career at the Post, it was just doing social media. And that's how I was able to have different touch points and different beats, covering like the Trump-Clinton debate or covering like, like the Baltimore riots and stuff like that. But, long story short, social media has made an incredible impact on my life. It's defined so much of my career. It's defined so much of who I know, including you fine people. And it defines how I think and approach so much about life. It's an awful place to be, no doubt. But I can't help but step back and appreciate how much of my life has changed because of it. And I don't know if I'd ever put it back in a box. It would be nice, kind of, and I'd be interested in life. But I definitely know that a lot of what's good in my life wouldn't exist without it. So I think I have to step back and kind of appreciate it for that. So I don't know. I don't really have much else to say. Maybe we can start with you, Dagan. I'd like to hear. Maybe start with you and what you're
absolutely, my
Dig,
friend.
wait,
Yeah,
Dig, wait 1 second.
Okay,
1 second.
Sure.
Gene, I just want to let you know that I have a dream that the Chi-Coms are going to launch an EMP and destroy the entire electrical grid of the United States so we never have to deal with the internet again. All right, Dagan, go ahead. And go on.
A big
Could
old
happen.
massive electronic magnetic pulse, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And note that I called them in Chai Comms like I'm in Red Dawn or something. Anyway, please.
Yeah.
Thank you for
I
that.
just needed to get that in there.
That's
Yeah.
good. It's no problem. So yeah, man. I mean, this is an interesting one from an older person's perspective. Maybe. I mean, I wonder if I would feel differently if I was a little younger, but maybe it's a personality thing too. But I feel to this day, since the inception of social media for me, I feel really conflicted about it. I really do. Like, and I think because social media largely sort of channels two distinctly different sides of myself.
Mm.
You know, like inherently, I'm a really shy and pretty private person. You know, that's just kind of who I am. But I also love kind of being part of communities with similar interests. I'm very passionate about sharing the things I'm passionate about. You know, I'm really enthusiastic about like, you know, being part of an artist community, illustrators, skateboarders, whatever, and talking about those things that we love together. So it's really kind of a hot and cold thing that I go through with social media. And it really depends which day you ask me. But if I think about it, I've always felt the same. Like since I was a kid, right? Like I remember drawing in a little notebook with crayons. And I was so excited to get the drawing done so I could share it with my mom or my dad or my friends or my grandpa. Like I always loved to draw. I always loved art and cartoons and stuff like that and cartooning, but I never wanted that, I guess, to exist in a vacuum. Like I was always really sort of, the joy of it came from sharing it, right? Like I think that just speaks to, because I could be an artist now, you know, creating fine art, painting somewhere with a real fuck you attitude and never sharing it. But my whole thing, it made sense that I went on to be a commercial artist and a complete sellout. And I love that because I love sharing the things I work on, you know? So you would think that side of social media I would relish, and I kind of do, but that flies in the face. I have this real crazy thing with my personality, and it might be a combination of just the way I was raised and, you know, my generation, but I'm very sensitive to feeling like I'm showing off. When I feel like somebody's very, very look at me on social media, it's a real turnoff.
That's me.
To me, and I don't want to be like that. You know,
Yeah.
I don't want to be the guy, you know, and it's not a thing where I think badly of somebody. It's just, it's a self-conscious thing. It's something, it's not for me. You know, I remember my younger friends with the inception of social media, my slightly younger friends, it was MySpace. And what was the other one that was the early
Friendster? Yeah.
Right? They were
I
all
had a
in on
Friendster
this
too.
thing. And I was so confused by it. You know, I was already a little older, probably in my mid 20s at that point.
Mm.
And I was kind of mystified by it. And then later on, Facebook kind of came and grew in popularity, and then Twitter. And I never went in for any of it. And then Instagram came along. And I already kind of knew that Instagram was being leveraged by the illustrators and the animators and the comic book artists to kind of show off their work. And it was kind of interesting, and I dug it. And it got to the point, I remember Instagram was already getting to the point where, I don't know, let's say this is 2014, 2015, where I knew artists that weren't big names, but they were professionals, maybe character designers or illustrators, comic book people, animation people, that already had like upwards of 10,000 followers at that time. Again, not famous artists, not household names by any means. So I found that intimidating. And I worked with a friend at one of the animation studios, shout out to Lacey. And she came to me one day and she was like, you really need to start an Instagram. Like, why aren't you on this? And she kind of twisted my arm. And that was really my first foray into social media. I started it and I enjoyed it. And I kind of enjoyed sort of hashtagging and the thing where it would just automatically draw you into the communities you were interested in. So it was kid lit illustrators and character designers, animation people, all that kind of stuff. And I dug it. But the thing for it was, as much as I enjoyed it, it was also dangerous for me because I was getting that thing that we hear about, right, with endorphins and like, oh, why isn't this drawing getting as many likes as this drawing? And, you know, it was sort of creating anxiety a little bit, right? And I was putting too much stock in it, with I think a lot of people do, where I was caring too much about it. And I that's when I realized I have to keep this thing at arm's length because I'm not sure how healthy this is for me. And over the years, I think it depends really on my mood and on my attitude that week. You know, where if my confidence level is high, let's say, and I'm feeling good about the work I'm doing, I'm sort of riding that wave, I'm more prone to share my stuff and also get involved looking at other people's stuff because I know it's not going to have a negative detrimental effect on my, you know, my confidence level, where I'm at with my drawing, whatever, if I'm feeling self-critical, where if I know now I'm learning where if I'm having a down week, I'm already not feeling that great about where I'm at. I feel rusty, let's say, with my drawing ability or just my creativity. I try not to engage with social media because then it has a negative impact on me, where I would hope I get to the point where if I'm feeling kind of down and in that rut, I could use it as inspiration. But I know it's not going to work for me that way right now. So for me, social media is just kind of knowing myself and knowing where I'm at on a given day. And then I could gauge it with it accordingly. So I'm getting a little better at it. But I'll tell you, man, I was thinking about this, Gene, when you emailed the topic. And I think my biggest beef, and again, this probably speaks to being a person who's about to be, you know, I'm about to turn I'm going to be an antique later in the year, right? Turning 50. And I think I think about this a lot and I don't always articulate it, but now that I'm really thinking it through, I feel like where is mystery? Like, where is mystique? We know everything about everybody now.
Yeah.
You know, where, and I lament that a little bit, like the loss of having to, let's say you're interested in something or somebody and you were passionate and you wanted to pursue that thing, you know, you had to do the legwork. You had to find out, read articles, go to the library, really kind of put the time in and the effort in to find out about something. Or let's say you revered an athlete or an artist or an actor or a director. You were probably only going to find out so much about that thing. So there was always some sort of mystery. There was always sort of the hope and the optimism that you could learn more and pursue that thing. Now you have everything about everybody and it's out there. And it's not, I guess that speaks to the internet too, not just social media, but I get really put off by that, you know? And I think for myself, I don't want to sacrifice, I don't know if mystique's the right word, but I would never want to sacrifice my anonymity, mystique, whatever you want to say, for popularity. I just wouldn't want to do that. That's just not who I am. I think something happens where, and it's not a financial thing. It's not selling out or having hundreds of thousands or millions of followers or something. It's just, I think it could kind of drain the soul out of something or somebody, or maybe even the things you're interested in. So for me, I really have to tread accordingly. Like I need to keep social media at arm's length. I really do. And, you know, and that's why I feel like I'm in and out. I'm a little bipolar about it. And yeah, it really changes for me on like a weekly basis.
Constellation is brought to you by Factor. The busy fall season is already here, and for me, things are jam-packed. There's all kinds of traveling, there's all kinds of games to cover, different events. And if you're like me, you're probably looking for some wholesome, convenient meals for those jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you fuel up fast with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. With Factor, you can save that extra trip to the grocery store and all the chopping, prepping, and cleaning up too, while still getting the flavor and nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes. So all you have to do is heat and enjoy, then get back to crushing your goals. And maybe you're looking for something a little fancy. You can level up with Gourmet Plus options prepared to perfection by chefs and ready to eat in record time. Treat yourself to upscale meals with premium ingredients like broccoli, leeks, truffle butter, and asparagus. I love Factor because sometimes getting around to cooking something, whether it's lunch or dinner, is not always convenient with all the different things going on at Last Stand, and having something to just go to that's awesome in just 2 minutes is great. Head to factormeals.com/con50 and use code CON50 to get 50% off. That's code CON50 at factormeals.com/con50 to get 50% off.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, even talking about it with you guys is kind of like a therapy session, but that's just where I'm at with it, you know? And I see like things like Facebook, right? Like Facebook, the boomers ran away with that platform, right? I mean, look how much that's changed. And I also see there's people in my lives that their lives seem to revolve around it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that could be very dangerous because I think that replaces actual real life. And again, that's not a judgy thing. Maybe that's your preference. Maybe that's the world you want to live in. You know, God bless. But I also think that I don't know. I think that it's also kind of dangerous in that it becomes like almost like an artificial reality. You know what I mean? Like you're living in this specific thing, but it's not really the real world. In other words, you're sacrificing your time. There's only so much time in a day. I think that's the other thing. And I think you guys are better. The millennials and the slightly younger people are better at this, but it's a time management thing too. I think if I really did enjoy it, I would get frustrated because I would rather put that time into doing something I love to do. Mm-hmm. Or I would probably, if I had more time in the day, I would probably play video games more, rather than be engaged in social media, because it does take time to be a part of that, especially if you have, you know, the social media status that you guys have, you know, where you're engaging with a really large community and it sort of ties into your livelihoods as well. Mm-hmm. You know, so I think that I feel compassionate for you guys because I think it really is part of what you do. I think it's part of your generations, especially for what you guys do specifically. I think it's tied into your jobs. It's tied into what you do. And your community is a big part of that, you know, where I have the luxury where I don't need to do that because I get paid to do something that has really nothing to do with the social media aspect of it. So again,
I can't imagine having a job where you don't have to fucking worry about social media. Like,
where you don't have to engage.
You know, that'd be amazing, you know? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. But
no, not at all. I mean, let me ask you this, Gene, because we really do have a different sort of approach and we interact differently with social media and we have to, right? Is there a time you could take where you could just take a breath and take a step back from it intermittently or, you know, a week every few months or something? Because especially if you're feeling that pressure, that might be good for you or somebody like you where, you know, it's really directly tied to your life. Mm-hmm. You know, can you step back?
Yeah, I think for me, I wasn't able to step back for a while, but lately, as I've gotten older, I've been making sure that I unplug a lot during the weekends, at least. I barely check it on the weekends. I've barely checked Twitter today. It's Friday, you know. I'm ready.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm ready to not like look at it today. I really, really appreciate your perspective though, Dagan, because I really feel like you brought up like the two dichotomies of what makes social media great and also like insane and horrible for our human spirit, and that we're able to find these communities, right? The LSM community. It made me think of what Colin said during the last LSM Live when he says, you know, I was at the biggest video game site in the world, horrible community. LSM, wonderful community, right? And yes. Because that community at scale is just really, really hard to manage. And at least with LSM, like we have unique interests, we have specific interests, we have inside jokes that we know that we can say, and people aren't just going to get on our ass about it, you know. So it feels very safe that way. And also for me, that was also the first time, like, you know, I was in high school. I was a kid that listened to a lot of techno, right? And this was back in the 90s where it was gangster rap and, you know, alternative rock and everything and rap rock. But I just really, really love techno. And because of that, I was called a lot of homophobic things for some reason, right? And now fucking every dude likes techno and dance music, right?
Yeah.
But like, you know, like everybody who wants to fuck is like listening to techno music right now. But then back then it was just like, oh, you got it, right? But back then it was weird, and like they used to call me homophobic things, and I would go online, and literally the first person I ever spoke to on the internet, I'm still in touch with her, and this was because we're both fans of the group Prodigy.
Fat of the Land.
Exactly, Fat of the Land. I'm literally forgetting the name of the first album, the Jilted Generation, you know. And she's actually a conservative person in Canada, and we've been in touch ever since. So this was when I was like 15, 14, and then we're still in touch. Her husband was working for the State Department, so we actually hung out for a bit here. So that was a wonderful moment. So again, I was able to kind of find my community there, you know. And again, of course, we find communities in gaming and everything. At the same time, you know, that there's that loss of serendipity that Dagan mentioned, right? That loss of mystery. You know, I think I mentioned early in an earlier podcast about how, you know, people in college, when they want to go to college and they want to find a dorm mate, you can list down the specific needs of your wants of what you want your roommate to be like, you know. My roommate in college was an evangelical Christian who thought that that AIDS was punishment from God to the gays, and that dinosaur bones didn't exist and they were placed on the planet to test our faith.
Ken Ham's father, or Ken Ham's son, rather.
Basically, yeah. And like, I had never been exposed to anyone like that before, but because I had to like literally sleep in the same room with this person, I had to understand who he is. I had to get along with him. I had to talk with him, and we talked a lot about like a lot of these social issues, and we kind of started to begin seeing eye to eye. And that was a really beautiful moment, and you don't get that anymore because you're just not exposed to these kinds of people anymore. You know, so that's kind of like I'm grateful for having that experience and knowing it helps me appreciate other people better, you know, no matter how different they are. And now what people imagine fucking being born like only 15, 16 years ago, and then you just have that. You can just find whoever you think you like and you just agree with them all the time, you know. And it goes back to this book that I always think about by writer Bill Bishop, and it's called the Big Sort, and how the fracturing of America is or how the basically like the gatekeeping of America is like tearing us apart. You know, it's talking about how, you know, certain beliefs and people of faith are migrating to this one town, or people with certain political beliefs are migrating to this one town, and that's all just, you know, exponentially made worse through social media. You know, now everyone's just moving to the same city, to the same town, to the same neighborhoods where everybody around might agree with you, and you're not really being exposed to other facets of life. So that's why when you do encounter like opinions that may seem surprising to you on Twitter or on Facebook or whatever, you're just shocked and appalled. You're like, how could anyone think like this, right? How could you even think like that? But because you never even met a person like that before, because the life that we lead right now doesn't make room for any kind of encounters like that anymore, you know. So I don't. So yeah, I appreciate, like, you know, the beauty of being able to find communities, but then there's also the flip side of, you know, we just get addicted to it, and we just want to stay, like as Kojima stated in Metal Gear Solid 2, we just want to stay in our own gated communities where no one is right and no one is wrong, but everyone is validated, you know. So that's
a great tie-in. Yeah.
Where do you stand, Micah?
Oh, so I got into social media. My sister got a MySpace account when I was in like middle school. And I remember I was like, oh, can we make me one? And I had that account for 20 minutes. And then I had like a panic attack, essentially, where I was just like, I'm on the internet. My information is on the internet. I was like, get rid of it. And she's like, well, I was like, get rid of it. And I made her get rid of it. And I didn't touch social media again until high school, when I could make a Facebook account. I got immediately like hooked on Facebook. Specifically, like, there was the little games like Farmville and stuff like that. But it was like, oh, I get home from school. I was always like a Yahoo Messenger kid. So like, my friends, I'd go home and we'd chat anyways. But now with Facebook, it's like there's more. Like, oh, we can send each other all this stuff. It was really cool. You write on people's walls. So I immediately liked the appeal of it, and I was just all on board. Facebook, like, definitely my favorite still. It's all about memes for me these days. Like, yeah, it's nice to see updates from my cousins and whatnot, but the reality is that I'm a meme lord, and I'm always in all these different groups getting the most obscure memes, posting my own memes. That's what it's all about. But I engage with other social media apps. I really love Pinterest, which me being like the only like woman who works here, probably the only person who uses Pinterest, but I adore it. It's all about recipes, arts and crafts, home DIY type stuff. And that actually kind of got me into the Reddit scene, because I was completely unfamiliar with Reddit till I started working here and had to start like moderating our community, which that's not the fun part. The fun part was discovering all the different things on Reddit I had no idea were there, because I never went on it. And then I find out, oh, there's a DIY community, there's a barbecue community, there's grilling pages, there's smoking pages. And that got me super into that. And now I'm like, I check Reddit far more than I expected. It's still a bit kind of like out of place for me. Reddit gets weirdly political about the dumbest things. It's a post about banana bread and someone brings up communism. Stuff like that happens.
There ain't no communists eating banana bread, I'll tell you that much.
But it just is. It's like, otherwise, I found through my work, I enjoy this certain aspects of this space. And that's kind of where social media is for me these days. A lot of it is me just getting information, especially like now that I use my smoker. And Reddit has been like a very valuable asset, being able to get advice from people, being able to read their advice, techniques and everything. I mean, that's huge when you're getting started with this hobby, because a lot of it is just there's a lot of variables to it. This isn't a podcast about smoking, so we won't get into that, but it just is that it's been really valuable to me. But I feel it more and more getting like hooked on it. And I do need to actively like set my phone aside and be like, we're not looking at the phone. We're playing a video game right now. Sometimes I'll literally just toss it to the other side of the couch. Like, we're not doing that, because it's too tempting to be like, I wonder what's going on. I'm in the Reddit for Nespresso coffee machines, right? Because it's really great. They tell you when the new flavors go on sale and all this stuff. But I'm like, I check it too often. I don't even want any coffee right now, but I'm thinking about it. So for me, a big part of it has been the self-control aspect. A lot of that got worse with the pandemic, of course. And I think that happened for most people, because I feel like I had a really great handle on my social media usage until I was trapped in a studio apartment alone 7 days a week. And you're working from home and you just don't leave. I lived about an hour away from my parents at that point. So it just was like, yeah, this is horrible right now. And that's when I started kind of leaning on social media too much. It is when I met Colin, though. As Jean mentioned, I met Colin through Twitter. So something fantastic came out of that hellscape.
Oh, it was through Twitter. Okay, I didn't realize that.
X.
Or X. Right.
Yeah, you know what? I still haven't updated my app, so it still says Twitter. Everything's still the same. So I still live in that universe. I'm still on that timeline.
Good for you.
But yeah, there's always going to be positives, but I do feel like there's a lot of drawbacks. There's a lot of negatives. I have to actively keep it in check, because it's way too easy to be like, I'm too tired to read a book. I'll just go on Facebook. And it's like, well, what's the difference? And like forcing myself to pick up the book instead, for example. Things like that are just always going to be matters of willpower, matters of like self-restraint, essentially. But in general, social media, it is now part of my job as well. I think that's kind of where some of the difficulty comes through, because it is that feeling of like, you could always be working. There's always people in the Discord, for example, and part of my job is to keep an eye on that. There's always people using the Facebook group. Part of my job is to keep an eye on that. Same
There's
with
a
the
Facebook
Reddit.
group for LSM? That's crazy.
There is. It gets pretty weird sometimes, but yeah, there is. We can let you in there if you want to come on in, but it is just an interesting facet now that this is part of my job. And even that takes me saying, I'm not checking this notification right now. I even turned off Facebook notifications on my phone because I was just getting so many from work that I was like, I can't check this 24/7. I need to be mindful of when I'm checking, and I want to check it with purpose of like, I'm working right now. I'll take a look at that. So doing things like that has helped a lot. But it is, I mean, social media, now that it's part of my job, it is one of those things that I couldn't imagine life without it. And I'm grateful that it exists. But it certainly does also add in some negatives to my day as well. But doing things like, yeah, my YouTube channel, for example, which I don't really upload to anymore, I lost my monetization. So it just kind of felt pointless to spend hours a week on videos that I'm not even getting paid for. But I did have like an issue recently, for example. I don't know if you guys know about the scandal, in quotes, with DK Oldies, which is like
I don't
a
know
game.
about it, but
I only know
Yeah, so it's like
about it
a-
through my friend Rich, that does the YouTube videos, but I don't know too much about it otherwise.
yeah, I only
Right.
know because my friend who does YouTube has been talking all about it. I haven't watched any of his fucking videos. So.
Right. So, DK Oldies is a site to purchase, games, consoles, etc. And they had some issues recently because people were complaining about the quality of their items. And one of the noted things was that people sort of figured out that, like, if a well-known person ordered from them, they would probably get nicer stuff if their name was recognized, type thing. And then these people would post about how great their experience was, while other people were getting consoles that were dirty, things that didn't work, And what happened to me, though, was that I did a video about their store several years ago, way before any of this bad stuff happened. I just bought something from their store. I bought stuff from several like retro game sellers just to compare them. And that video from 4 years ago suddenly started getting all these really mean comments from people saying, like, you're a shill, you're a liar, like you're selling out for them. People threatening me. I had to start deleting the comments because people were being really mean. And then I just ended up putting the video like on private because people just weren't looking to see that the video was 4 years old. And it was like, this is way before any of their problems started, and that was a major downside because I remember feeling like every time I got a notification on YouTube, I was like, I hope it's not about that video. And it was, and it was just people being increasingly hostile because I bought 3 games from this company and a controller. But that was the first time I ended up just taking a video down because I was
People
like, I
are
don't
so
want to deal with
fucking
this
stupid,
anymore.
Oh,
man.
wow.
Yeah, and it was too, just like, this video is 4 years old, just read, But so that was when I started experiencing some of the negatives myself, because generally speaking on my YouTube channel, I would get pretty positive comments, largely though because that was the nature of my content. I tried to just post about games I loved and not talk about things I disliked, so I wouldn't invite negativity. It's like, I'm not trying to tell people, oh, I hate that game, and invite a bunch of bad, energy. I just wanted people to talk about games they enjoyed and things they enjoyed. So in general, the channel was pretty positive, but once that DK Oldies thing happened, suddenly I was just getting like all these hateful comments. And it was just one of the first times I really had to deal with that because generally speaking, people were pretty nice to me online.
That goes back to what I said about misinformation spreading. Like that's just like another thing where people aren't fucking thinking and they're just like commenting and spreading things. So now there's this thing that you're just some DK Oldie sellout because they don't realize like how old the video is, and that shit just spreads like wildfire for no reason. You got nothing to do with anything. You didn't do anything with it,
Exactly.
And that was what I experienced at the Guam chat room. I was like, like that person's not sleeping with Teresa or whatever, I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? This is insane,
No, exactly. That was the first time it really felt like something was kind of like out of my hands. Like generally speaking, I have control over my social media presence, obviously what I post on there, what people think about what I say, because I'm very clear, direct. I'm not going to post anything ambiguous and have people make up their own minds about it. And this was the first time that I was like, people are completely misrepresenting this video, what it is, and it was a weird feeling. I don't want to say scary, but it was a weird feeling of, this is completely wrong. And I know it's something Colin experiences when people like clip out our shows, for example, and it's like, you're going to take 10 seconds of a 3-minute explanation and be like, see, he said it.
Yeah,
and that's the type of
all the
stuff.
time.
Right. And that was the first time that it sort of happened to me. And I was like, I hate this. This is giving me agita. Like, I don't like this one bit. But it is. It's all about balance at the end of the day, because I need this for my job. It's very important to what I do for a living. And also, the real like start of it for me was keeping in touch with family and friends, keeping in touch with people after high school that I don't live near anymore, that I don't really want to bother them with a text, but sending them like a Facebook message feels way like more low key, for example. So things like that, keeping in touch with people is really the core of why I'm on it in the first place. But now that it's part of my job, it is really important to me to just maintain that moderation, not get too sucked into it, because it's really easy to just spend hours just staring at my phone and realize I started this because I was just working. And then I got distracted by a bunch of barbecue videos and God knows what else. So I don't know, it's something I'm still working on, but I do feel like I'm getting better at that.
It's good to have friends that remind you of that too. Colin's become my new friend who does that to me, where he'll text me and be like, dude, just get offline. I'm like, yeah, I know. So.
Yeah, you got to say, like, I wish more people came to my aid in previous times where I probably should have just logged off. Not that I'm like ever really that aghast at the way I've acted, but I will say this. I've taken a lot of notes as I've listened to you guys, and there's a lot to say, but I'll try to narrow it down to this, is that, Gene, I think you're right, where our age specifically, our age bracket, like around there, really hit the internet and then grew with the internet and then hit with social media right when it was really for us or people around our age within that 5 or 10 year window maybe. And so I always felt like I think about GameFAQs and my time posting there for many years and how you would express yourself or let people know who you were. And you could do it through your username. You can do it through like sometimes a brief bio or something. But often what people would do, and I don't know if you remember this, is that they would literally just have signatures at the end of all their posts where, and I remember I used to do things like, Colin Moriarty, and I'd have something like the Islanders record or something like that, like weird things like that. And it would always update, and people started doing things like that. And I think that was the kind of micro expression that would come to define what social media would become with Friendster. And then I think with MySpace, so Facebook's a really great example. I was going into my sophomore year when Facebook launched, and being in a Boston area school, I was of the first people allowed to go on Facebook. It was like the first, Northeastern was one of the first 16 schools or something. And I remember clear as day, it's a very strange thing, because I do remember, like I really do remember it. I was an intern at IGN that summer, and I remember being at my computer making a Facebook account and how different it was and how interesting it was. And you were adding your friends and trying to scope people out. And I always tell people this, that, and you probably certainly remember this, is that there would be a thing called your wall, and it was just a field, and it was just text. You could just do whatever you wanted, and you could erase what anyone ever wrote. You could make it seem like someone else wrote something. It was hysterical. Like, it was supposed to be like a whiteboard on your dorm room door, basically. And I got MySpace late. I got MySpace in 2004 as well. My band in college, Paper Champ, we had a MySpace account, and I started that was kind of relevant to us to share our music and all of that, but I never really used it on a personal level. And then I got sucked into Twitter at IGN, because IGN was interesting, and the gaming industry is interesting in that it's very myopic on Twitter. That's kind of just where it exists. And it was really vital, I think, probably to my rising popularity at IGN and in the games industry as time went on. However, I think I have pretty decent timing in realizing that I no longer, and I don't want to say I no longer needed it, but that it no longer had real utility for me anymore, where so people know, because I've talked about it extensively, because it was difficult to do, and it was a process of just being like removing yourself. But it's been like 2 years since I posted socially really on Twitter, or just generally on Twitter, outside of promoting shows or whatever. And that was a thing that I had to kind of stop myself from doing, because I felt like it was too easy to misinterpret things. It's too easy to be mean. I don't want to pat myself on the back. I think the four of us are all somewhat similar in this regard, just in our disposition, is that Twitter's a difficult place to be clever. And I mean, we are clever people. And when you're clever, it's like, oh, I want to fuck you up so bad right now, because I thought of this funny little thing, and I wrote down in my notes here about doing the constant calculus of the attack, or the calculus of the making fun of this, or is this going to have blowback on me? How funny is this going to be? Is this going to be worth the heat it's going to bring back on me? It's so strange, but you think about those kinds of things. And eventually I was like, this is this sucks. And
It's a stupid exercise, right?
exactly. And a political commentator and philosopher that I used to really like, Sam Harris, who I've just fallen off with completely, he is right about one thing recently, and he got off of Twitter completely, and that he says that it basically amplifies everyone's worst instincts and makes everyone, and someone said this earlier, into caricatures of themselves, where it's like the worst possible version of you. It's not you at all. And he would say something, and I think this is probably true. Think about the motherfuckers you hate more than anyone on Twitter, and we all have them, right? Whether you interact with them or not. They're probably not as bad as you think in the real world, because this is an amplification machine. And the thing about social media as it's evolved is that I think if anything, social media has a global utility in sharing news and information and circumventing things and all that. And that's dope. I love that. But I think that it's existed long enough now where it's been commoditized and commercialized and figured out. And what people have figured out is that the guttural instinct of outrage, regardless of what it is going to get you to pay attention. And Twitter it's funny to think about this, but Twitter was just a little more innocent 10 years ago. It was commodified, but it wasn't manipulated like it's been now. And I think about a platform like Twitter. I feel like I was really high on Elon Musk Twitter for a while, as people know, and listening to the shows at the time, if you listen to them contemporaneously to when different things were happening, because I love the idea of a guy coming in and saying, like, we don't really need a workforce this big. Like, what the fuck do any of you even do here? And that kind of stuff. And I think that kind of stuff was necessary. When you think about companies like Microsoft or Facebook that have hundreds of thousands of people working for them, I'm like, that's so insane. You are so inefficient. How can you be so inefficient? And so to see a company do this was interesting, but there has been, and I think they're kind of almost disconnected from each other. They've just really gamed it so much now. You can tell that they've really narrowed down and burrowed down into the stuff that really makes Twitter churn in the worst possible way. And I feel like it's almost been corrupted and ruined. And I was reflecting on that recently with Micah, where I'm like, I feel like Twitter is so bad now in some sense that it's been totally bastardized, unless you specifically only read who you're following. But if you ever try to use any of the discovery tools, which is what Twitter is really supposed to be about, it's supposed to be about following people, but the discovery tools on Twitter are essential. And everyone who is a super user of Twitter knows that, whether it's what's trending or what it's recommending to you, or when you click your little magnifying glass and you get all the things like sports and news, that stuff's got to be, really tip top. And that was based just on algorithm and some light human editing. And you could see the political bias in that and all of that existed before. But I really am sad because I feel like Twitter is probably irredeemably bad. I think this whole it's going to go away, it's going to blow up. And I'm like, no, it's not. The loudest people that say this say it on Twitter because they are so addicted to it that they can't imagine, even though they hate it, in quotes, they can't imagine a world without it. That's the most pathetic shit. Fucking total, put a mirror in front of your face. You look so lame and so corny. But so I don't think that the doomsaying about Twitter is true. I just think that for me, it has churned me out, I think, eventually. In what I was saying recently on Sacred actually was, what I need to figure out is the old RSS days. So think about like the early 2000s. You'd have this RSS module and you'd be like, I want to have IGN PlayStation, and I want to have Politico US News, and I want to have whatever. And it would just feed it. And everyone knows how that all worked, right? On Google and other places. And that is what social media, specifically Twitter, I think has become. And for me, that is what it's become. And I need to revert back to a more passive stance, because the unfortunate reality is that I don't tweet anymore and I don't read what people tweet at me. Although I think two things have helped me. No one really tweets at me anymore anyway, which is good because I don't tweet very much. And I think losing my check mark was a really good thing for just removing me from discoverability in some way, which is also good. But I still try to use it as a tool. What's going on in the world? What do I need to know about? This is the best way I can see what's happening with the Jets and politics and all these different things at the same time. And I need to find a replacement for that. The one thing I wanted to say too was, I think, and I've said this, I've expressed this several times in different ways, but I think that, and this is a me problem, but I think it's probably a common thing, is social media and Twitter specifically, and just constant app accessibility has introduced a level of ADD into my life that I didn't even think was possible. And I've said this before, and people have tried to fight back on me, but you don't really know me. You have to kind of trust what I'm saying, right? I was the most hyper focused, insanely work ethical, like gotta get it done, gotta do it, no procrastination, all that stuff. This is the kind of energy, and I know people say like that is ADD energy. I'm like, I guess so, dude. The people I knew that had AD&D weren't writing fucking 250,000 word game facts articles. So that's the kind of focus I'm talking about. The crazy level of focus. It was a major advantage for me because I wasn't the naturally like most intelligent. I don't get the math concepts and all these things. I had the focus to try to just figure things out and do things. And I'm broken. And I've said that to Micah, and Micah notices it and realizes it in my everyday life. I am broken. I can't finish a fucking TV show. I can't play a game without listening to a podcast. I can't eat fucking dinner without having YouTube on. I am fucked, dude. And I think about
I can't fucking eat dinner without YouTube on.
Yeah,
man.
I love that that's a meme.
Insane. I'm like, when did I start doing this?
I love that that's a meme. But think about this. Right. And this is, Gene, this ties right back into what you were saying about living in both worlds and being the last generation that lived in both worlds. Is I was not that broken. And I don't know what the fuck I was doing with myself when I was 12 or 14 years old, but it wasn't this, you know? And now that I'm 38 years old and just well indoctrinated into this, I can't even imagine what other people are going through because I feel totally shattered. And it's not because social media did something to me or it's mean to me. It's because it's distracting as fuck because you can figure anything out. It used to be that you'd go to a cavalcade of websites. I would sit at 15 years ago or more, I would sit at my keyboard and be like, all right, I'm going to go to Drudge Report. I'm going to go to IGN. I'm going to go to this. I'm going to go to that. And you would just do that. And then you get up and go. And now it's like, that's constantly there. I'm like, oh, what's going on with my fantasy football team? You know? Oh, I can listen to Spotify. There's probably, are there any new podcasts up? Oh, it's totally fucked my brain up to the point where I wonder if I should be medicated. And this is a really disappointing thing to feel in my heart when I'm trying to remove myself from my antidepressants and everything like that.
Yeah.
And try to like lessen all of that. So that's kind of what came to mind for me about all of this, because I will not deny that it was really important to me, but this is what I try to tell Gene and people like Gene, although it might, your where might be different depending on who you are and where you are in your life and in your career. I don't know. Me stopping on posting on social media has been irrelevant to the growth of the company and people listening to this content and watching that. And when you think about your own interaction with the content you like, doesn't that make sense? I'll watch a summoning salt video on YouTube. I have no idea what the fuck that guy has to say about anything anywhere. I don't even know if he's on social media,
Right.
So I've really tried to focus on that. If anything, it's given me fewer ways to trip over things and give people reasons to hate me, And so that's why when I see Gene posting on social media or is doing things, I'm like, there are other people I've tried to reach out to where I think I'm like, dude, you're broken. And I'm not even talking about Gene. I'm like, they're like people that are just, that I've really tried to reach out to, being like, you got to stop. Where I'm like, you sound crazy.
It's so good to be. All three of you have expressed this, though. You're all mindful of it. And that's a really big step, I think, for people your age. I don't mean to sound like the grandpa. Kyle, can I interrupt you for 1 second? Please. Because when I was talking about my relationship with social media in general, again, I think somebody my age, at least with my perspective, does have the luxury of moving in and out at my sort of discretion and enjoying it and then being turned off by it and then sort of adjusting my behavior accordingly. And that has been my relationship with social media, because I remember a time as a young adult even into my adulthood where I enjoyed life without it. So I could revert back to whatever behaviors I was sort of enacting at that time and be like, I could live without this, in other words, where you guys were much more, you guys were much younger and impressionable and sort of adopted it at an early age and stuff like that. So, and it's not everybody, listen, it's not all the class of 92ers, because there's a lot of people my age that are addicted to Facebook, for instance. You know what I mean? They can't stop. That's bragging about their family vacations and pictures of their friggin' kids and their new Mercedes and what I mean?
God,
they're
addicted to so many fucking 50-year-olds who post exactly like
that. Dude,
I think
maybe Gen Xers are maybe the worst. Mm-hmm. But I have at least that perspective and that luxury. But when you say, Kyle, that you feel broken, even I feel this from time to time, especially with YouTube. It kind of crosses over into addiction. But I would think even you and Gene and people your age, maybe 8 to 10 years younger than me, were still old enough to remember a time like me where you were enjoying life without it. So why not just revert back to whatever that version of Colin was and channel that? You know what I mean? Where, you were always dialed into technology, your generation. But I think not necessarily the social media component. So why not? That's what I do. I just go back to a world where it was like, I remember if I wanted to find out about a pro skater, I waited for an issue of Thrasher to come out with their interview, right? Like, that's what I did. And I learned a little bit about that person, and that's probably all I ever learned. Now with the internet, I could find out, this guy's family status, his marital status, what's going on, his hobbies, his favorite color, his favorite fucking ice cream. Like, and I remember a time where it was just kind of fun not to know.
Yeah, I agree.
So why? In other words,
The mystery,
sorry to
like you
interrupt,
said,
but
right.
can't you kind of channel that? I don't know what that is, 16-year-old Colin, and be like, maybe I could kind of flavor life a little more like this before these distractions.
Well, yeah, that's what I need to do. And that's what's so funny about it, is that it's in there in us somewhere, and certainly in our experience. And then in our lives since then, we reflect and know that those things are in there. I think that there's this obsession with being, and we actually talked about this on a recent episode of Sacred, about being part of the so-called zeitgeist, about having to have something to say about everything and being part of this conversation and stuff. And what I've realized is that that's not really that important to me, with rare exception. And I guess it's easy to say as someone with a microphone where an NFL-sized stadium listens to your big podcast every week, and so you get to say whatever you want and they listen and hear you. But to me, I don't necessarily care. I like hearing what other people have to say sometimes, especially in sports and politics. Games, I really don't. I've never, as an adult, really been interested in games coverage, which is so funny because that's like all I've done as my living. But that might be the reason. But I think a lot of people show restraint. I think some people need to show more restraint. And then, of course, it's just the things that turn me off are not only the hostility. I mean, the level of hostility you meet on social media is comical. And one of the things that I try to remember, and as I've gotten older, I think wisdom, I've said this before, but there's something about it where it's true. Like, things just settle in your mind and you understand them. And then you're like, what was the problem? Or like, why did I have this lack of understanding? Mm-hmm. But there are severely broken people on social media. Think about the people in your lives, and maybe we're gonna have some weird exceptions here and there, but generally speaking, aren't the most functioning and normal people like not in that world at all? Mm-hmm. And then the people that act crazy online, they try to be normal in person or whatever, and then it's an act. And I guess what I'm saying is that as I've gotten older, people have said, you can't say anything to me that no one said to me before, right? But every possible insult, and that's why people threaten to kill me and come to shows and kill me and do all those crazy things. It's like, I don't know. It just speaks to the severity of how broken you have to be to act like that on a public platform. Either you have fuck you money and no consequences in your life, which is very unlikely, or there's something wrong with you. Because obviously people don't act like that otherwise. And so the hostility is one thing, but it's actually and I've said this before, my audience knows this, is that I think that social media allows people to become very parasocial, which is very uncomfortable for me. And like when people act like they really know you, or they're too comfortable saying whatever they want to, it's like, no. And I think that the thing that gets me the most is pedantry. Just, you want to fucking murder people on there more than any of the insults or any of the whatever. It's just like the pedantic fucking bullshit that people say and do to get attention or whatever. That's the stuff where I'm like, no, because then the bigger you are, you become a platform for that behavior, for other people to do that to you. And this is what I'm talking about the calculated nature of Twitter and how it's been figured out and kind of corrupted and permanently, I think. Doesn't mean it's not going to go away. People can't resist it. I can't resist using it still and all of the rest, but it is what it is. So we've come a long way since the live journals and all of the rest. And I agree that we're missing a certain level of restraint that I would like to see more, and mystique. But we lack that mystique. And Dig, you were touching on this. We lack that mystique in all things. Think about the things that we make fun of all the time, the expansive universes of fiction and all these things. Like, there's no mystique about anything.
Nothing.
Think about Boba Fett 30 years ago.
God.
and then think about
So
Boba Fett
different.
now.
We know his face. We know his kids.
Dude, it's crazy. It's
you know?
like, what the fuck are you taught? Like, so that's like emblematic of the lack. And it's
That's
as you said,
interesting.
you
I
could.
never thought about Boba Fett as like the figurehead of all this. But
Well,
yeah.
I think it's Dagan and I have the shared love of old Boba Fett going back to
Yeah.
our younger years.
Yeah,
And
me too.
you're right. And everyone loves Boba Fett, but I think you'll relate to this, Gene, where it wasn't cool to like Boba Fett. I mean, now now everyone loves Boba Fett. It's like, you love Boba Fett. Who's your favorite character? Obi-Wan or Yoda or whatever. And it's like Boba Fett.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, you know, the dude that's in it for 10 seconds and we don't know anything about him.
Yeah, it was a shared little secret, like a little
Right.
shared little inside joke
Yeah.
among people who maybe have read the books or just really enjoy the 10-second appearance of this character. You know, It was
No
a cult following,
incinerations.
right?
Now it's Grogu.
Yeah.
Right. We had no incinerations. Now it's Grogu.
No
status.
incinerations.
Mhm.
And Dagan knows my favorite scene, and basically outside of some of the space scenes in all of Star Wars, is in Empire when Han comes into the room. Darth Vader stands up at the table. He goes to shoot him. He puts his hand up and takes his gun, and then Boba Fett walks out.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh my god,
So
we don't
good.
need
It's
to know
all we
anything
needed.
else about him. Leave him alone.
That's
Yeah.
all we needed.
God, we should probably Colin and I should probably do a Star Wars Constellation or something.
Oh my god, dude! People would probably kill themselves because there's
Oh my
so many of
God.
these people are
They've
so
so
tired of
had it
me
with
just
us.
bashing
Just
on
need a
Star.
release.
Just
You can just do a montage of every time Colin has ever talked about Star Wars, and that will be an episode.
relentless bashing of Star Wars. But people are like, you got to watch this and you got to watch that. And I'm like, you don't get it.
Yeah.
I'm done. You're not getting me back. I'm done. I'm only always going to make fun of it from here on out. All right. Gene, are you satisfied with the topic?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, my friend. All right, Michael, let's move on to you. I want to hear what you have to say this week.
Yeah, so my topic this week is homesickness, being homesick. I have lived in Virginia for 2 full years now. I moved here in 2021 and I enjoy it here. I like it. It's a nice neighborhood. Where we live, there's more convenience than I'm used to. I grew up in very rural Western Massachusetts. And so I enjoy a lot of things about being here, but I do still feel that twinge of some days I really miss home. And I was waiting to do this topic with a group of people who had all moved away from home, essentially. There were times that I wanted to do this topic, but it was like, oh, we had Dustin or Ben
Fucking
on.
Dustin,
There's no offense
the
to them, but
homebody.
they have lived in, Pennsylvania their whole lives. So
Oh, good point. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I wanted to do this topic. I was kind of waiting for when I had, all people who had migrated elsewhere. And so some of the things I want to touch on, what do I miss about home and how I try and make this place feel more like home. What do I do for that? I think the main things I miss about Massachusetts, number one's the people. And I know we're called mass holes and everything, but I miss that genuinely. I miss not having to talk to the cashier. No offense, but I miss that people were kind of cold, aloof. I honestly miss that lower level of interaction when I go to the pharmacy and I say my name and say thank you and they just give me my stuff and I leave and it's not a 5-minute conversation. It's very sweet and endearing here in the South that people are so friendly. But sometimes I just want to get the fuck out of there. And it really is just can we just speed this along? The cashier, he's really sweet and he's asking me what I'm going to make for dinner with these ingredients I'm buying. And I just want him to keep ringing the things through so I can leave, but
I hate that too. I like why are you trying to get a read on my personality? I'm not trying to get a read on yours.
Exactly. It is just too much at times, so that's one of the major thing I miss about home is the people. We are cold, angry, and mean. And I liked it that way. I liked it the way it was. Of course, the weather, the scenery, my favorite restaurants, all those things factor in of, yeah, I miss being home for those reasons too. A really big one that I had to kind of work through was not getting married in Massachusetts. Because I think every girl from Mass wanted a fall wedding with the leaves and everything, and it's chilly, and that was kind of always the dream. I'm still getting my fall wedding here, but it's different. In October, it's usually 70 degrees here versus it'll start dropping down to the 50s up north or worse. Sometimes they're already getting snow by Halloween. So it's things like that. Fall apple picking. It's just not even a thing here. I looked into it because someone told me, oh, we have apple picking, and it was literally like an hour and a half away.
Oh, wow.
I'm not trying to drive an hour and a half to go pick apples. That was something that was super easy back home. I lived down the street from an apple orchard, and there were 3 more within like 10 miles. It just was really accessible. It was really easy to find. Same with like a pumpkin patch. I'm not trying to drive an hour to go get a pumpkin out of a field. I don't love it that much. But I miss the ease of some of these activities that I was really used to back home. It's those things are what kind of start to compound when I feel like I'm getting more and more homesick. Because it's not that I can't just do these things, but it's so much more difficult. It's so much more difficult to access some of this stuff. And a really huge kind of way that I do keep like my connection to home is sports. I'm a huge sports fan. These days, it's football and hockey. I used to be a really big, basketball fan, Celtics, of course, but I just don't have time for that anymore. It's way too much to keep up with. But sports really are my like lifeline home. Aside from, of course, like texting my family, we talk every day. But sports are what make me feel like I still have that piece of Massachusetts here with me. And when those months where we don't have sports, I honestly do just feel a little more out of place around here. I feel a little more not at home. Like, especially watching the hockey games, for example, I will admit that like when the Bruins got knocked out of the Stanley Cup Finals last season, I cried, but not because of they lost. It was because now my team's out of this, and I like that connection, following their posts on Twitter and everything, the photos of the guys at the games, that is gone for months now, basically. And it's a really huge part of my life. Watching those games as a kid, like with my dad and everything, was largely how we bonded. And so we text all the time about hockey. Every time there's a game, we're talking about it afterwards. So as soon as that season ends, I feel just totally almost cut off from Mass for several months until hockey comes back. And then I'm just beyond excited about it. It's the same with football. Of course, watching the Patriots games and keeping up with that. That's my biggest connection to home at this point. Wearing my sports gear, finding random fans at the grocery store. It's always a treat when someone sees me like in my Pats hoodie and they'll say something about it, and I know that they're from Mass too. But those connections are really the biggest ways that I just still feel at home here, because it is still hard. I actually got like teary-eyed in traffic recently because I saw a car with Mass plates and I hadn't seen one in months. And for a split second, I was just like, oh my God, like there's one, I have mine hanging up in my office for my old plates, but it reminds me how much I miss it. And it reminds me how out of place I still feel at times, because for the most part, I'm pretty settled in around here. But when it comes to holidays, especially, or the sports seasons, it just reminds me that I'm not truly at home. And I hope that in the next couple of years, this will feel more and more like home. But it kind of just comes up randomly. And holidays are a big one, too. Not having a white Christmas, for example, is kind of a bummer. It's a real shift to get used to it being like, 50, 60 degrees on Christmas, and it's grass everywhere, and we didn't even get any snow. Things like that are really difficult. But then other ways that I just kind of feel a little bit like hometown pride, I suppose. It's stupid things, though, like when people notice my accent, which no one ever pointed out ever until I moved here, because everyone talks the same back home. Or when people point out little phrases I use, like saying a tag sale instead of a yard sale. And people are like, what's that?
Wow, I have no idea what a tag sale is. That's crazy.
Yeah, I didn't know it was regional until I moved here. And I mentioned it to someone. I was like, yeah, they're having a tag sale. I was calling because I said they're having a tag sale. He was like, what? And I was like, yeah, like there's a community tag sale, and it was a yard sale, or same as saying like we're going to go get grinders instead of like hoagies, for example. Is those little phrases that remind me of home always. And these aren't things I'm doing on purpose, but that's still what's in my vocabulary. And of course, the accent comes up frequently. People make fun of some of the words I say, but it does just make me smile when people do notice it, mostly because I can't change it at this point anyways. Colin would love it if I could say hereditary or like heretic, differently.
Heretic. Maybe you will. I my accent started to go away the longer I was away from the East Coast and Long Island, and the people that speak like that. So maybe it'll go away for you too. But that's okay. I find it very endearing. Indeed.
I think the biggest one which came up was my inability to distinguish the various words like marry, such as like Merry Christmas or like getting married. And I can't say those two words differently. And Colin can say it. Like he can say Merry Christmas. And it sounds different.
It's Merry Christmas, getting married. Mary is the woman. Mary had a
hard E and hard A.
Mary had a little lamb.
If I'm talking about a woman named Mary and she's getting married, Merry Christmas. Like, and they're all the same word where I'm from. And I saw like a meme about it. And it was like, if you're from like this half of the US, these three words are all the same. And I was like, that is it. Because the first time Colin heard me say like Merry Christmas, he was like, what? He's like, you can't do that. But that's one of those things like I've tried. There's something about those words with the ERs in them that I can't say those very well. All those are like my hardest words. But yeah, it's just one of those things that it makes me smile when people do, even when they make fun of it. The fam likes to make fun of the way I say hatchback, which I don't. That's one that comes up whenever, like they'll randomly be like, "What kind of car do you drive?" I'm like, "It's a Honda Fit," and they're like, "What is it?" Like, "It's a hatchback," and they'll be like,
"It sounds like Minnesota, though."
Yeah,
a little bit, like a little Fargo in there or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it gets way worse. I don't even have the worst accent in the family. Like my grandma's famous for, she always says Palm Springs instead of Palm Springs.
That's awesome.
Hers is the worst. Or
now I'm starving.
The other thing the fam does is like adding a T to the end of things. Like instead of saying across the street, it's across with a T on the end.
Yeah,
and that's one I never picked up because my mom would have like beat me. But other words, I did end up getting, like plaza, for example, like a shopping plaza. And Colin says that differently as well. Yeah. That you said that was one of the ugliest words I ever said.
Yeah, plaza? Man, oh man.
But that came up because my grandma, who has like the strongest accent in the family, is the one who largely taught me how to read. And she would read me Eloise at the Plaza and such other books. So half of my pronunciation was taught directly by Grandma Watson, who just has an accent like you wouldn't believe. You know, half the words she says. She's also like, it's always talking about fresh produce instead of produce.
Oh, wow.
You know? That one comes out for me sometimes. For the most part, it doesn't. The big one, though, is if somebody's named Doris, like Doris. And back home, that's Doris. And other people would say like Doris, but like it's Doris. Right. Or my Aunt Laurie.
Laurie, right. That's what I was going to ask you about. Laurie. I'm like, so Laurie?
Right. And it's not. Her name's Laurie. You know, like it's like Laurie's seasoning, but it's spelled Laurie.
Right.
But growing up, that was always Laurie. And people would call her Lori, and we'd be like, no, it's Laurie. And I never even knew anyone named Laurie until much later in life, because that's just how you'd pronounce it back home. So that's me rambling on about how much I love Massachusetts. Even that, people tell me I say wrong. I went to the DMV when I moved here, and I showed them like my birth certificate because I'm changing over my license. First of all, they laughed at my birth certificate, because I guess the ones back home are very not fancy. It's just a typed up piece of paper. And the ones here look like a high school diploma. They're very elaborate.
Yeah,
so first of all, they laughed at my birth certificate. And she was like, come over and see this. And she's showing it to other people. She's like, look at this. Like, and then they asked me, they're like, so what state is this from? And I said, Massachusetts. And she was like, from where? And I had to repeat it like 3 times. So like, I guess I don't say that right either, which is the most comical. But yeah, I'd love to start with Jean. You know, certainly moved very far away from home.
Mhm.
I would just love to know, do you still feel homesick? Do you feel more settled in than I do? How long did that take type thing? I just love to know your experience having moved quite far away from where you grew up.
This is the easiest Constellation topic ever. I fucking hate home. And I'm so glad to be away from it. All my life on Guam, even when I was a kid, I was like, I can't wait to get the fuck out of here. Because I knew, because for a lot of people, growing up on Guam is a tiny, tiny island. You can drive around the entire fucking place in half an hour, 45 minutes at the most if you're kind of taking your time, you know? And there's only 150,000, 170,000 people at most there. Tiny, tiny place. If and if you're growing up and you are fascinated with the world out there, then people like me went insane. Um, I remember getting commercials for fucking Disneyland and in Guam, and when I was like a small child, and I was like, why the fuck can't I go there? Why are they showing me this? And there's no physical way for me to go there. Why is a world like that? Why can't I see other people like this? Why can't I do things? Um, and even when I grew up intellectually, like in high school, again, like people around me hated techno. I didn't know anybody who liked techno in Guam. It's a very, very like mono culture where if you're kind of an individual, then there's a saying in Japan that says the the nail that sticks out gets hammered down or something like that. So that happens all the time especially in a small culture like Guam. So like I was always like kind of counterculture, like really just going against the grain, really not listening to or liking the same stuff and having different political thoughts than a lot of people. When Bill Clinton visited Guam in 1998, I was actually an intern for the paper and I covered that visit, and I wrote a column incredibly critical of it, and people hated me for it. People got on the radio like, what's this fucking 17-year-old kid know about Bill Clinton or whatever like that. Like I've been getting that shit like all my life, man. But yeah, like I just never felt welcome. And on top of that, it was just a really, really bad economy. There's only tourism and military spending, and a lot of that is like Hawaii, but like Hawaii is a much bigger state with a much bigger gross domestic product. Guam is incredibly poor, and Guam was really the first place where like I started to see the benefits of a Republican Party. Where I started to see, hey, maybe we need to cut back on spending because like this government has no fucking money. And so why are we spending stuff on this? And that was during a time where I really started to understand at least the classic conservative viewpoint of a smaller government, smaller fiscal responsibility. But on top of that, Guam has a huge drug problem. I've mentioned this before, but I've grown up around meth labs. My exposure to the Super Famicom was through my buddy whose older brother was a meth cook and dealer. So I would always go to their house, their meth lab house, and I would be playing Super Dragon Ball Z on the Super Famicom, having a fucking great time, And that's how I played like Final Fantasy VI early. So like a lot of my like early video game days, my hipster days, again, tying back to another topic later, started because I was hanging out at a meth lab, and I was getting exposed to all these great games from Japan. And eventually I ended up doing a lot of drugs myself. When I went back to Guam after college, I was still hanging around people who cook meth, people who were cooking ketamine, and I was doing that stuff. And I needed to get out. By 2006, I desperately needed to get out. If I still lived there, I'd be dead by now, for sure, in some way or another. Because of the drugs I was doing, because of the activities I was doing, because of the people I was interacting with. And my story is not unique to that. I have a good buddy, Gus, who was a strip club owner and a meth user as well. And he also needed to get out too. He was like we were both talking about like, dude, we need to fucking get out of the situation because we know that this is bad for us. We know that we're spiraling down into addiction and just a really bad life. And so, I met somebody from Hawaii who was going to school in Hawaii, and I decided to use that as an excuse to move to Hawaii because I just needed to get out, and Hawaii was the closest thing. I thought Hawaii was a great in between California, where I went to school and where I really wanted to get back to, and Guam, which was home. Because to be fair, like it's still the environment I grew up in. I still am I feel pleasant around tropical trees and beaches. Like that's the good stuff. Everything that comes with being a part of a tropical paradise. That's great. But it's the people, contrary to what you said, Mike. It's the people that I fucking hate, and I can't stand to be around them, and they're toxic. So me and my buddy Gus, we both moved out around the same time. I went to Hawaii, he went to Korea. I went to Hawaii, I cleaned up, I became a good journalist, a well-known journalist, And Gus, great story. He went to Korea, and now he owns one of the biggest barbecue restaurants in Seoul, which is fucking fantastic.
That's
like,
awesome.
I see his fucking face in restaurant and like Japanese tourism videos and whatever. I'm like, that's awesome. And I still haven't eaten at this place, but he's a good guy. Me and Gus have a funny story where I almost got arrested because we both got into a fight in Korea, and he knew, but I wasn't a Korean citizen. So he ended up punching the bouncers and the cops, so he would get all the attention, and I would be able to run away. But the great thing about being arrested in Korea for a drunken fight is that it's no big deal. Like, you do it all the time. So you just spend the night in the drunk tag, and like you just let go. So he was fine. He just took the bullet from me. Gus is a real dude.
But if you're a foreigner and arrested doing that, they'll send you to the DMZ.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't know. I was like embassy sanctuary. I was saying all this shit. Just because some guy took my seat at the fucking bar. But I'm getting off track. Yeah, Guam is just not a place where I wanted to work. Career wise, I wouldn't go there. It's such a static place. I recently watched a YouTube video of this dude who moved back there, and he was in the army, and he moved back there for a little bit, and he was doing like walkarounds with like the malls and like the plazas, sort of, as you might say. And fuck, man, like it's the exact same fucking stores, the exact same fucking like layout, like the place is fucking frozen in time. And for some people, a lot of the people I grew up with, that's what they want, because again, that they live there and they're accepted there and they feel great there. So I'm really one of the few people in my class of 99 that just moved out of Guam and just decided to stay that way. There's so many people who ended up working in like big companies like Yahoo or Google or whatever like that. They couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle the difference of the cultures. There's so many different cultures, so many different things to deal with. Like, they just couldn't handle it, and they just ended up going back to Guam, and they would just marry their high school sweetheart and just call it a day. And that's just their life. It just continued. And there was a part of me that'd be a little bit jealous, because these people just know what they want, and it's very easy to get. Just go back home and marry the girl that you've been dating since high school, and that's it. And have kids with them, and then they go to the same fucking school that you went to school with. So like, I'm seeing their kids, and they're in the same fucking school uniforms that I wore when I was a kid. So it's like, it really is just a static place, and I just could not stand it. I could not stand to be in a place that's just the same. And Hawaii is actually a little bit similar. If anything, I'm a little bit more homesick about Hawaii, because there's a little bit more diversity, but it's not really that much more. Not to the point where when I moved to LA after college, not to the point where I moved to DC and stayed out here. I would still rather, as much as I miss Hawaii, I would still rather live in DC. As awful as this place could be, I would still rather be here, because I'm just happier here. I'm just more intellectually stimulated to be here. There's so much more culture that's just not, just the island culture, and people just want that. And I was introduced to so much diversity. Again, the evangelical Christian that I was roommates with, but also I had a black roommate. I barely knew a black person before I moved to LA. There was barely black people on Guam, and barely black people in Hawaii too. There's black people in Hawaii is like 1%. It's less than that on Guam. The only black person I ever met on while I was on Guam was a girl I dated, and she was a daughter of a Marine, so I knew her dad too. But a black Marine and a military black girl aren't exactly like very representative, like, overall wider black culture, So it really wasn't until LA when I moved there. And I was like, I love this. I'm like, there's Indians here. What the fuck, dude? 2 different types of Indians. Can you believe it? Like, I was like, I can't believe there's more than like islander culture in Filipinos here, So like, for me, like white people, like white people was so shocking to me, because when growing up on Guam, every time we saw white people, we were like, you all look the same to us, And then like I moved to California, I was like, man, there's Irish folks and Swedish folks and Germans, and I started to understand the difference between Germans and Irish and Italians, and I was like, this is wonderful. I'm learning so much. It's exciting for me. So yeah, I really just don't miss Guam at all. I haven't been back since 2009.
Wow.
So it's been ages from me. Nobody either thinks about me. I don't think about them. I am easily the most successful person out of our school, but no one ever talks to me because I fucking hate that school and talk shit about them. So like I'm not like honored there like I am like at Cal State Fullerton, where like I'm literally on the Hall of Fame in Cal State Fullerton. But on Guam, like nobody talks about me because we both abandoned each other because Guam hurt me deeply, and I regret. I wish I found there's many parts of me where I wish I was born elsewhere, and I was always thinking that ever since I was born. I was like, why the fuck was I born here? What the fuck is this? This is such a mismatch of person to place, So that was when I started to realize, like, life is just like a cruel bunch of circumstances, and I'm now finally being able to make the life I've always wanted to lead now, so yeah, I just don't miss home at all. I'm glad to be away from it.
Yeah,
there is part of me
mean,
though that I am jealous of people who have a place to call home, because I basically don't. There's no place for me to run back to. If I got laid off here, I don't know where I'm going. I'll probably have to move to my sister's place in Seattle or whatever. That would be the new home, but there's no sense of familiarity. There's no childhood place that I can easily just go back to and access to. And yeah, it's very, very far. Like, why the fuck would I go back to Guam now? Even when I barely visited when I was in Hawaii, when it was like still 8 hours away. It's so fucking far away too from everything. The only benefit was that it was nice to, like, I was visiting Japan and Korea all the time. So my exposure to Asia cultures and Asia cities was great. So that's why when I first visited New York City, I was like, this is New York City? That's it? I was like, I've been to Seoul. I've been to Tokyo, like I've been to Singapore. Those are fucking amazing cities.
You're lucky a rat didn't come and take you away in New York City. Just come get fucking mugged by a bunch of rats.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, this place is a shithole, So I appreciate New York City for what it is now, but like at least in terms of like tech and like cleanliness and like infrastructure, everything, I was like, wow, this is supposedly the greatest city in America. Okay, So that's how it kind of informed my perspective. I have a greater, deeper appreciation and exposure to Asia. Dustin's just going to Japan for the first time. And like, that's interesting. But and also, like, I've never been to Europe. So anytime I say that here in the East Coast, you're like, whoa, you've never been to Europe? And I was like, I lived on fucking Guam and Hawaii for like most of my life. When the fuck am I going to? Have you been to China? Have you been in Japan? Have you been in Korea?
Singapore?
Yeah, Singapore.
Super jealous.
Yeah,
have you been to American Samoa?
You're not Europe. You're not missing anything.
Oh no!
Come on,
you're not missing anything. The old world, they call it the old world for a reason.
For a reason, yes, exactly. Like, why would I go there? I like it here just fine in America.
Yeah, you don't need to go. You're not missing anything.
Yeah. David Hasselhoff, tear down this wall. That's what happened in Germany.
I hate how you say that. Yeah.
No, that was a quick story. One of the most endearing things to Colin when we relatively first met was we were talking about the fall of the Berlin Wall, and I said, David Hasselhoff, tear down this wall, because I thought that's what the fuck happened. And Colin's like laughing hysterically. He's like, do you think that's what happened? I was like, he was there, because David Hasselhoff was there. All right. And he was like, it's, Mr.
Okay.
Was
it's
he?
Mr. Gubenschlotz or whatever it is, whatever the guy. Yeah, he's like, it's him. And I was like, right. Well, David Hasselhoff was there. And I guess I fused those two things in my head. Gene, you bring up so many good
about David Hasselhoff being there? You mean David Hasselhoff having...
Was he Michael Knight at that point?
He was at the Berlin Wall. He was dancing. They had a concert.
Oh, yeah, because I was going to say he was big there. Like,
exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, he was there.
Yeah. Like he had as a musician, he was big, or like a singer. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm not going to Google this, but I'm pretty sure this happened. Yeah. But Gene brings up a lot of good points. Some of this, I will admit, I kind of like romanticize home. I'm from a very small place. My hometown has a population of like 17,000 people. It is wild to me to live here in like the suburbs of Richmond, where there's so many people. I'm still not used to it. I'm still used to a very small town.
So many people in Richmond?
It's
compared, right?
Yes. Yeah, but like for me, this feels like the big city, and there's parts of that I don't like. I mean, I'm used to driving, 45 minutes to go to Walmart, for example. Here, there's 10 Walmarts. Like I like the convenience of it, but I do, in some ways, kind of like the nostalgia clouds it of something you mentioned, Gene, I grew up in a very low income area. A lot of that was because of the recession. The industry back home was machine shops and factories. And when the recession hit, several of those closed. And a lot of my friends' parents lost their jobs. My mom lost her job. That's when we lost our house. And so the area bounced back, but not to the same degree. And then as well, the heroin epidemic, which I've lost several classmates to. I'm only 30, and I've had a lot of classmates pass away.
Yeah.
And it's those are the things I'm easily able to forget because I'm not there. You know, it's easy for me to think about all the good things about home and miss it a lot.
Yes.
Without thinking about, right, you used to walk down the street and there were needles on the ground. Or two, I didn't grow up in a very nice place either. I grew up down the street from like a porn bookstore, videos and stuff. And then there was like several bars down the street from my house. Homeless people, and people from the bar would like walk across our yard at night, throw cigarette butts and God knows what else just in our yard all the time. I grew up on the railroad tracks, which doesn't have the best connotation, but I liked there. I never would have left Mass if I hadn't met Colin, because I totally just pictured living my whole life there. I wasn't the kid who wanted to go move somewhere else. I just genuinely liked it. But I can see when someone else brings up some of the problems with their hometown, it's like, yeah, these are the things that I forget. And I can forget them. I'm allowed to forget them because all I'm thinking about from here is I miss my favorite pizza place and I miss, hanging out at the apple orchards, all that type of stuff. But I forget that, well, I don't live in a place now that's full of heroin, and that's a huge plus. I don't live in a place now that has really rundown schools. So these are things that are definitely advantages here. And I totally do just, the nostalgia glasses make home seem 10 times better than it actually is. I'd love to move on to Dagan. And, obviously a big part of Knockback is you guys growing up on Long Island. But less so have I talked to you, Dagan, about how you feel about it, like right now. Are there times that you still would actually want to live there? Do you like life in Pennsylvania better? I guess I haven't spoken to you much about the actual comparison of how you actually feel about those two places, or other places you've lived as well, if you have like a favorite so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, you make a really great point. Like, there is something really funny about, and this occurs to me certainly for myself, but if I've learned anything, right, it's like, nothing gives your hometown pride a shot in the arm like just not being there anymore, right? And you said it so perfectly, like with distance, that fondness for that place grows. And I'm always rocking my Long Island stuff out here in Philly because I have so much pride in where I'm from. And I still love it, but I do wonder if I live there, would that pride, would that nationalism, that Long Island pride, would that be as amplified if I was still living there? I don't know. But I still love it like I always did. Helene notoriously hated Long Island because of how crowded it is. And she was, even in the really scenic parts. And I took her, I remember while we were dating, while we were both in school in Philly, we would end up on Long Island to visit my dad or visit our aunts or my grandparents or whatever. I would try to sell her on Long Island by taking her to the really nice spots. And she'd be like, it's just too crowded, because once you get on the Long Island Expressway, it doesn't matter where you are. You realize like this place is insane with people. I mean, millions and millions of people on that island. And it's big, but it's not that big, right? So I miss it, but I'll tell you, for me, homesickness, I don't get properly homesick anymore at this point in my life, at this stage, because I feel like I'm home now. I feel like, I think all in, like all told, if you tally up all my years, and again, on the verge of becoming an antique this year, like, I think if you look at growing up my first 20 years in New York on Long Island, right? And then you have to factor in living in New England for a little while. I lived in Connecticut and I lived in LA for a brief stint. Even all told, I've still been in the Philadelphia region for over 25 years. I think it's been like close to 27 years. So this is home. you know, my wife is from here. We met a long time ago. I mean, Helene and I have been together. We've been married for 21 years. We've been together for 27. We bought homes here. We raised a family here. You know, our kids are both teenagers now. So this Philadelphia, the suburbs, Doylestown, whatever you want to say, this is home to me now. So when we inevitably leave, which we will go south at some point, I talk about that
Oh, you're
on the
gonna come
podcast
down-
from time to time, but we'll end
Come
up in
down
Georgia
here.
or south, and then we're going to do the accent.
Yeah. Oh,
Me and
down.
Kyle are going to do the accent proper. and
Maybe
it-
go down.
So
there
it'll
to
be South
Georgia.
Carolina.
Oh, South
probably.
Carolina.
Could be Georgia. Could be Georgia. We don't know yet.
Yeah.
But that's almost going to happen. So I get sad when I think this is the place I'm going to be homesick for. But when you emailed the topic, Micah, the first thing I thought about was this, which I don't know if I've ever talked about this before. And again, this whole episode's becoming like a therapy session for me, but that's all right. This is kind of a fun thing to talk about. I am homesick for this idea that I've had in my mind for a long time. So it's kind of like an alternate reality of what could have happened, or pining for something that had things happen differently, I could have had it this way. And let me explain. So our parents got divorced when I was 17. Colin was 6. And my mom left New York and really essentially never came back. And I never really thought about this, I don't think, or it became really ratcheted up when I had kids. But I have this idea of lamenting this loss of what could have been had my parents stayed together and lived in the home that they built together, their dream house ostensibly, right, in 1987. So if my parents never got divorced, if our parents never got divorced and still lived in that house, 1 Marie Court, right, then I feel like them not being there and not being together gives my kids, or it kind of, my kids don't have that home base generationally. So my kids have a home base here. They're born and raised in the Philadelphia suburbs. They have that. But when I was growing up, we had our grandma and grandpa's house, which was my mom's parents, right? Our maternal grandparents. And that was sort of like our home away from home, right? And by my parents getting divorced and inevitably having to sell that big house and leave that beautiful part of Long Island and everything, I feel like I often sort of lament what could have been. You know what I mean? And my kids having that home base, which was my home base. So being able to share where I grew up and the place that I lived from when I was 13, I get sad about my kids not having that, not having my parents together, one, and not having that place in that part of town. And that sort of, I don't know, that sort of anchor that I had and not being able to share that with them. Now, like us growing up, my kids do have that on Helene's side, so they have their maternal grandparents together near our home, and it's the house that Helene grew up in. So they do have that, but just not with my family. And I get really sad about that sometimes. So it is this sort of homesickness. It's sort of homesickness by proxy, though. It's homesickness for a thing that was never going to happen, but it's more homesickness for this idea, this concept of, oh man, wouldn't that have been so cool for my kids to have that sort of, to sort of had that the same context that I have of growing up and seeing and spending time where I grew up in that neighborhood, in that setting, near the bay, in that house that meant so much. And also having, grandma and grandpa together. Now it's kind of cool. I mean, despite the distance with both my parents, with both our parents, my kids, there is a closeness and a love there and a bond. We're very lucky that way. So despite the distance, that still exists. But I don't know, there's something about that alternate reality of like having that warmth and that comfort of, grandma and grandpa being together and being in that house and how cool that could have been. And I think that's just like being a child of divorce is hard. It never really goes away. It's been like over 30 years, right? It always hurts. But I think it hurts a little more. Like that pain gets exacted when you have kids, because, and they're not, the thing is, my kids aren't thinking about it with the same severity as I'm thinking about it. But because you love your kids, you want them to have the things that you want them to have, everything. And they don't have that. They'll never have that, you know? So it's kind of a weird version of homesickness, but I certainly do feel that sometimes of, wouldn't that be so cool? Wouldn't that be so cool if my kids could go to Marie Court in Brookhaven on Long Island and be in that place and have grandma and grandpa under the same roof? You know, the other cool thing is, I have to say, you know, we like to pick on mom and dad, Kyle, but our parents are pretty cool. Like they're close, they're friends. There's a friendship. There's not that frigidity between them or that tension. So it's not even that. It's just having this, I guess it's just giant question mark always looming of how, I wonder how that would be. I say that to Helene sometimes. I'm like, how does that feel? Like, you're 47 years old. Your parents are still together. They still live in the home that they built together in 1977. Wow. It's the home you grew up in, right? And she tries to explain, but the thing is, Helene doesn't know anything else. So, you know what I mean? She doesn't have divorced parents. She only knows it that one way. So how great can she articulate something? It's the only world she knows. You know, if anything, Helene would be like, my parents should have got divorced like 30 years ago. Are you freaking kidding me? Like, it's like, all they do is argue, you know, that type of thing. But it's almost like a jealousy, you know what I mean? But again, like, that's silly though, because my kids at least have that on the one side of the family, which is kind of an interesting thing. And my kids are getting to the age now where I could talk to them about it too. Like, how do you feel about grandma and grandpa not being together? You know, grandma's remarried. We have Larry, you know.
I'm just going to interrupt that. The builders need me real quick. So keep going. Oh
yeah, sure. Yeah. You know, we have Larry, we have, you know, my dad's been with Nancy for many years. So it's kind of like this other surrogate family, which is kind of cool, right? Kind of adds more people into the mix, more characters, more people to love them, more people to buy them gifts. But yeah, I think that's the thing of being from divorced parents, is like certain aspects of that, I think, will plague at least me for like the rest of my life, of like, oh, I wonder how that would have been had they been together. We could go celebrate holidays out there, and, you know, they would come to us together, and kind of, it would be there is a different dynamic that I'll never really know because they're not together.
Yeah.
Right. And it's frustrating.
I mean, even in very small ways, I'm doing the seating chart for the wedding because we finally have enough people who have RSVP'd that I'm just starting to put little things like that together. And I just made a joke to Colin, and I truly mean, like, no offense, but I was like, your parents are fucking up my seating chart because they each need their own table. But I was like, I honestly could have the perfect table if I could put like both of them together, like with their spouses at a different one. But I was like, but I'm not going to do that. But the reality is that I was like, so now I need to craft one table for them, one table, and I'm like separating the siblings between the tables to make it work.
That's hard.
But I was like,
Oh, man.
and it's just, I'm getting it together. The good thing is that there's enough of you guys, right? The good thing is that they had enough kids that I have plenty of, you know, siblings and nieces and nephews to work with.
There's different ways to work it.
Exactly.
But
It
politics, yeah, you're right. There's politics, right?
Right. And it was just funny though to be like, their divorce is fucking up my seating chart right now. But you're absolutely right about sometimes just thinking about that, what could have been. When I talk about when we lost our house when I was a kid to the recession, essentially we sold it before it got foreclosed on. We were going to lose the place. We sold it instead of getting foreclosed on, got very little for it. My parents never bought a house again. We lived in apartments, you know, all through high school. Eventually, now they live in my dad's childhood home because my grandma is now in, you know, like assisted living.
Okay.
And so they watch the house. But that house is going to be sold eventually. And it is, for me, difficult to think of, yeah, if they sell that house in the next few years and I didn't have kids yet, my kids will never see my grandma's house where I spent every summer. Things like that. They'll never see my childhood home because we have no connection to it anymore. It is hard.
That's
hard. It is definitely hard to think about that type of stuff of, yeah, what if we never lost the house? How much better things might have been. You know, a lot of that homesickness probably is tied to my perfect version of home that lives in my head only, that truly never existed. But in my head, Massachusetts is all maple syrup and ice cream cones. And the reality is, much like Gene pointed out, there's a lot of bad things that I grew up
Yes.
to. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and Dagan, I definitely Helene might not know what you're talking about, but I do, because my parents got divorced around the same time that yours did, around
Oh, I
around
didn't know this.
16, 17. So
Oh, wow.
I think a part of that, Colin, I was just talking about how my parents also divorced when I was 16 as well.
Oh, okay.
So I don't have, I think a big factor of how I don't feel like I have a home is because the home was broken, So I absolutely do feel your pain and your like wistfulness for that alternative reality, because we just didn't have that. Imagine how prosperous my family might have been if they were able to stay together, and just like you guys, they get along just fine, and they're very good friends, and they communicate often. And
That's cool.
And they've supported us throughout the years, and they really, really made sure that it didn't. They really tried to minimize the negative impact of the divorce, but truth is, it's always going to be there, and I'm always going to wonder, why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You pay the price forever. That's what I've come to realize. I've expressed to my sisters my own kind of growing animosity being. So I was in California for so long that, like, I lived in California, and where are my notes here? Here they are. I lived in California cumulatively longer than I lived on Long Island, which is crazy because I'm like totally renowned for being a Long Island homer. But the reality is, and I wrote this out just to see, is that 1984 I was born. So 1984 to 1993, Long Island. 1993 to 1996, Maine. 1996 to 1998, New Hampshire. 1998 to 2002, Long Island. 2002 to 2007, Boston. 2007 to 2017, San Francisco. And then 2017 to 2020, LA. And then 2020 to present, here in Virginia. And so now the Maine and New Hampshire ones are a little rough because I probably spent a third of my actual calendar time on Long Island during those years, but I still lived there. I would do summers and holidays and some weekends and stuff on Long Island. And when I came back to Long Island full time, it was a different house, same school district, but different house. So a lot of moving, and I'm in some sense, I've realized that I've been very adaptable in my life, in large part because I was forced to be in reality. So when I was in Boston and I got my job offer at IGN, and they were like, yeah, move to San Francisco. And I literally left in 3 weeks. That was unthinkable to people. But I was like, yeah, all right, it's time to go on to the next fucking voyage here. I'm 22. I've already lived in 7 different places anyway. It's like, okay. And I was moving every year in Northeastern to a different spot. So I'm thankful in some sense that like that level of adaptability was just baked into me at an almost genetic level at an early age, such that it's like, yeah, to Christmases, to this, to that, you got to go here, you got to travel here. You're just constantly inconvenienced. And so it's like, yeah, of course I got to move across the country to the most expensive place in the United States to get my dream job. Yes. And I'll do that. No problem. And so, yeah, there's a good side to all of this, but I would say that I'm homesick for Long Island, but really I'm homesick for that first bracket of time that I expressed, 1984 to 1993.
Yeah.
And Dagan was a little off in that I was 7 actually when my mom left, and it was February 1992.
Oh, right, because you turned 7 in October, right. And then, yeah.
And what I've become, and I don't like talking about this, especially, I mean, I try to be an open book on this show because that's kind of what it's about, but I don't want to make it seem like my parents or our parents are like bad people with the way like that I criticize them sometimes, because they're really not. They're actually really wonderful, good, decent, kind, caring people. And I have a great relationship with both of our parents. And I've always had a great relationship with my mom. But as I've gotten older, and especially since I've lived in Virginia, and I've realized how family kind of operates again on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis, and you're kind of just involved in things, and how important it is for us to get together and all this kind of stuff, I'm like, I can't help but feel the energy. And this is what I was telling my sisters, was like, where was this energy when I was 7?
Mm-hmm.
It's really wonderful that it's like vital. It's so important. Like, for instance, Dagan is probably not going to be at Thanksgiving, right? You're not coming to Thanksgiving this year, I don't think.
No, not this year.
Yeah.
No.
And it's like, first of all, I got to say this. Maybe it was because I was always somewhere, but like I never really gave a shit. It's always nice to see people, right? But like the politicking about who's like trying to jockey for people and all that, I'm like, I don't know, man. Who cares? Like, just let everybody do whatever they want. But hearing my mom talk about how it's like, oh, well, we're gonna really miss Dagan this year, and I'm like, yeah, of course we're gonna really miss Dagan, but and how vital it is and how important it is. I'm like, dude, you blew up my entire life. Who the fuck do you think you are talking like this? You know, I haven't had a normal holiday in my entire fucking life since I was 7.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's vital and important again that everyone gets together. But I had to do the 2 Christmases and the 2 Thanksgivings get dragged around like a fucking paper mache doll, you know, for years, to the point where that was, again, just baked into my brain where it was normal until finally I was like, and this is why I get annoyed with mom when she's like, because our mom and her husband own a beach house in New Jersey, which I haven't been to in years, since college. And she's like, you got to go to the, and I'm like, I don't want to go to the fucking beach house. This is you used to drag me there during college. I'd have to be in these 8 or 9 hour drives just to be here. It's like, I'm sick of being at everyone's whim because of this fucking one decision that destroyed reality for me. And now we have to act, now that I'm 38 years old, it's vital that we're all together again.
You're not sad that Thanksgiving's going to suck without us?
Of course I'm a little
Let's
sad.
just go back.
I'm a little sad about that.
I can't get
yeah,
past
make it
this.
about you. It's fine. I of course, like I've always been very laissez-faire about that, just because I've always, and I've especially as an adult been, there are times where I've come home and there are times where I weren't. Well, it wasn't. There were times where I was in San Francisco totally alone and people are like, oh, that's so sad. I'm like, no, it's not. This is exactly what I want. I'm doing whatever the fuck I want right now. I'm playing video games. I'm eating. I'm hanging out. I'm smoking. I'm drinking. Hanging out with my stupid friends in our Arrested Development, you know? And so it sounds like I'm bodying our parents in some way, and I don't mean to do that, but it really upsets me because when it mattered most to me, there was nothing there to be found. It was complete chaos and dysfunction for years. And that's why last year, and I got a little, I wasn't mad at Dad, but Dad came to Virginia after Christmas. I only get about 2.5 weeks off every year, and I take them at the end of the year. There's no other time off per se. And again, I'm not trying to act like I'm a coal miner, you know, taking a shower in the basement as I come through the garage, you know, into the basement doors and come upstairs and greet my wife hello and she'll, right, exactly. And I'm not acting like that's my life. It's not. But I'm constantly on. There's always something to worry about. I live in a constant state of distress, basically. And I look forward to this 2.5 week period where I could just shut myself off and literally there is nothing to be done. And Dad was, because of the nature of the divorce and having now 2 separate families and all these things to do, it's like, well, Dad's with his wife on Christmas. I have no problem with that. I don't care, you know, but it's over. Christmas is Christmas. The 25th. So when you come on the 27th, right? And now you're staying with me, which is fine. Again, I'm not trying to be mean, but it's like, now we have to celebrate Christmas again. And it's funny, but dude, this is what I said to Dana and Allie last year. I'm like, how long am I going to have to pay for this fucking divorce? You know, how long am I going to have to pay for this?
Yeah.
Because now I've lost all of my, so I told them because I'm like, I want to communicate to our parents this year, like it's over after the 25th. Regardless of the decisions you make, it's done. I need just time, dude. Please, I'm desperate. I told Dana and Allie, and Micah knows, I almost started crying late last December because I was like, I have not had more than 3 consecutive days this vacation to just do nothing, to just be away from everyone and just shut down. And I have to go back and record something in 2 days. You know, and then the 365 days of being on it exists again. And so this is a total tangent to the homesickness, but I'm homesick, not for the place, but for the time. And I'm certainly homesick for Long Island. I think Long Island's awesome. I love Long Island personally. People that don't understand Long Island are mystical to me, that it's very mysterious. It's a wonderful mixture of people and culture and food and all of the rest. We're salt of the earth style people, in my opinion. But I do miss the innocence of that original time, and I long for it. It's probably where knockback even comes from for the both of us in our own generational views. But I get annoyed about just that whole angle to it. And that's something that's becoming really prominent in me recently, where I just want to be like, oh, don't you, how have I letting you gotten away with this for so long that you have no awareness or don't care about how you come off, and how weird it is that you guys talk about the importance of family and tradition and this person and this person. It's like, dude, you ruined my entire ability to experience any of it.
Yeah, it's a shame,
Oh,
right? It
fuck.
had to break bad. It had to get like catastrophic for it to be fixed again. And that's exactly what you're talking about. That period, which affected you because of your age, it affected you the deepest. Like it just did. I mean, Allie to some degree too. She was little. You know, all of us, but especially you guys, because you were young and you lost out on things that Dana and I had for at least another few years or to several years, right? So the scars are just a little deeper. I think, Kyle, as long as you communicate all that stuff, everybody's got to honor it. You know, you're an adult just like everybody else in the equation, right? So you just got to be real demonstrative and just kind of lay it out. Just be clear, and just say like, look, this is what it is. I miss Long Island too, because an important thing to say is where I am now, we're like an hour and a half from the beach. Not that bad. But on Long Island, you can't really be geographically more than 25, 30 minutes from the beach. You just can't, right? Even in the middle of the island, you can't be too far. I miss that. I miss that a lot. But Gene said it too, and it's a good thing. And one thing that we're not saying is that, can you imagine, and there's probably billions of cases of this, where a divorce happens and the fallout is irreparable and it never comes back. Like Gene's saying, at least his family remained intact and his parents remained loving and friends and were able to, and the same thing, it took a while in our family, but it did repair, so we do have that going for us. But that fallout, it's difficult. It never really goes away. That's the thing of it, I mean, I look back with like rose tinted glasses, like a lot of us are saying, like, wouldn't have been that great if mom and dad stayed together in the house, and we would have taken it for granted. It would have been great to have the pool and the kids go back to Long Island and visit every few months, but not as great as we're picturing. But, in comparison, it just seems like, oh, it's a fantasy, right? It really is a fantasy, something we'll never know.
But this is what I think too, is that I wouldn't want to change anything, like the timeline that got us to this point. It would all be different. Everything would be totally different if that didn't happen. And I understand that. So I'm not trying to tempt fate and change things. And now I'm like a janitor. Not that there's anything wrong with being a janitor, but now I'm like a janitor at some fucking office building, and I'm not doing this. I wouldn't want to like butterfly effect that out of existence. But I would also say that everyone has escaped accountability in the situation because there were no bad outcomes. And that's the only reason that there was able to be. It's really the four siblings that were able to ultimately stand up on their own to make it so that there was you don't have this intervention style thing where it's like, what went wrong? And it's like, well, our parents divorced and now, Colin's a fucking crackhead, that kind of thing. It just never happened.
Yeah,
and
it's well said.
I think
I don't think anyone met that, so there's that. So. It's a precarious situation after being the kid of a divorced parents, for sure.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. I want to express those things openly. Like, these are my preferences. This is what I'm going to do. I'm 38. This is how it's going to be. But at the same time, I think the time has passed for us to really talk about it as a family. You almost have to let it go. That's why it's awkward, because some people are like, why don't you talk to mom, or why don't you talk to dad about it? It's like, I don't think that that's really going to be productive, because I'm not out to like upset people. It's over. It's long over. But I do think that the ramifications of it were largely dodged by, frankly, having pretty good stock. And I don't know if the four of us get decent enough credit for that, in some sense, that we all kind of survived. And it's through their own hard work too. I mean, they definitely kept it together as well, and I appreciate that, but they were not the main players in that story at all. But they certainly had the most effect. It's like the weather, it's just I don't know.
It's well said. Yeah.
Hell of a topic, man.
It really is.
I didn't know we'd be having therapy, but honestly, this was quite productive.
Good
I feel
shit.
like I feel like this was very good for everybody.
Yeah.
So A+ gang, it's on the homesickness / child of divorce topic. I feel like that we broke some ground that could help some people.
Yeah. Oh, welcome to my depression.
Yeah. To put a bow on my own experience,
Yeah.
I looked up an old friend of mine, an old meth friend of mine. So he actually so he's actually the former comms director of the former Republican governor of Guam, and he was arrested for having a meth lab, and he decided to have a press conference in his fucking meth lab garage, and started to name all of our friends. So he was hoping to drag down everybody along with him. He didn't mention me, which was nice. And then later, I see the latest news story about him. He's being sued by the other communications director of the governor because he started a social media news outfit or whatever, and he started posting revenge porn of her where she was in a threesome.
Man.
And started posting it on the fucking internet. So she's suing him for the damage that caused. And the attorney that she's representing, I know both of these people, and the attorney who's representing her is my best friend's ex-girlfriend. So again, that's how fucking small Guam is. It doesn't fucking change. It's just the same fucking people being rearranged and having the same fucking problems of accusing each other, sleeping with each other, having threesomes and having videos posted on it, and also smoking meth. Like, it's just like I needed to get out of that fucking situation. I'm so glad I can like look at that and be like, I'm glad I'm not in that fucking news story right now. You know.
Fair enough. Dave, let's get into your topic third. I leave it to you.
All right. Oh, this is exciting. I love the Constellation roulette wheel. I never know where this is going to land.
Yeah,
I never know when you're going to be up.
Yeah,
I know. I was first for the first time ever. This time I was like, "Ooh, that's crazy."
Yeah, maybe I should be more transparent with it, but I just like kind of go with the flow. You know,
this is good.
Yeah,
it's all good.
Okay, good.
All right, my friends. I thought of this one recently. I have a long running list of topics I want to do, but this is a relatively new one. And I said, "Oh, this will be fun. This will be interesting." I have a lot to say, but I have even more to ask your opinions on, maybe your definitions on. Guys, I want to talk about hipsters today. All right. This is an elusive topic. Again, should be interesting. And I'm coming from I'm channeling a very specific memory. And that's what sort of caused me to want to talk about it. But the hipster, I mean, first of all, another gift from the millennials. I feel like, thank you for that, millennials, the hipster. And I think when I kick it over to you guys, inevitably, I want to know anything, your experiences with hipsters, maybe specific ones in your life, what your definition of a hipster is. But it's interesting because I think the word hipster and just the hipster in general has been in like modern culture and popular parlance for like the better part of 2 decades now. I feel like it's almost a household term. Like I feel like boomers know what a hipster is now, right? So I feel like it's safe to talk about, but I also have a lot of questions, you guys. So first of all, I consulted the dictionary, Oxford English Dictionary, for the definition, the dictionary definition of hipster. And here's what it says: a person who follows the latest trends and fashions in clothing and lifestyle, especially those regarded as being outside the cultural mainstream. Okay? So keep that tucked away in the back of your head. Here's my definition of a hipster, at least from my perspective. And again, you guys may take exception to this. You may disagree, and I want to know all this. A hipster for me, okay? I have a very set image of a hipster in my head. It's a guy, very well dressed, skinny jeans, sleeve tattoos, beard, curly mustache, right? Drinking like some sort of like flavor of the minute cocktail. But here's the thing for a hipster for me. I think it's just somebody who dresses, wears a certain, flavor of clothing, appears a certain way, eats at a very specific restaurant, drinks a specific cocktail, and lives in a specific neighborhood because it's cool. That's it. Because it's cool. That is the definition of a hipster. And here's why I think it flies in the face of a Gen Xer. And I don't know, are there Gen X hipsters? There might be. There might be. I'm not taking that off the table. I don't want to like claim that we're above the hipster. But for me, the hipster sort of feels like the 80s or 90s version of a poser, right? But here's the thing about a poser. I remember probably 1986, 87, I found out what a poser was, right? Because my friend, an older skateboarder in the neighborhood, had a quarter pipe or a launch ramp, and he had a bunch of stickers on it, like, of that era, Santa Cruz, Slime Ball, Mr. Zog's, Sex Wax, like all the cool shit town and country. And he had a no poser sticker, right? Which was the Ghostbuster symbol, the red circle with the line through it, the no smoking symbol.
I kind of remember that being an icon, the no posers thing.
With the word poser.
Yeah.
And
I
was like, just seeing the word, it just made sense. I understood what a poser was. You just understood that's what it was. It's somebody who talks the talk, but they don't walk the walk, right? They have the fit, they look the part, but they don't do the thing. So a skater back then would have had all the gear, right? But couldn't ride a skateboard. And I knew a couple of people like that. But I feel like when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, right? Your identity was tied to a thing, something, an activity, a specific style of music that you liked, a sport, a community, maybe a specific art, maybe you were an artist, but the way you looked was kind of drawn to what you were interested in. So skateboarders looked a certain way, surfers, punk rockers, hip hop cats, artists, right? And if you think about it, right, this concept of looking like the thing you were interested in, like kind of wearing the uniform of the thing you were affiliated with, dates back decades, right? Like think of like the hippie, our parents' generation in the 60s and 70s. They looked a certain way, they dressed a certain way, but that was all about a philosophy, right? Love, free love, freedom, rebelling against the man, right? But there was a root, right? There was a foundation for the way it looked and the dress and the music and everything that kind of sprang out of that. But even go back deeper, right? Like think about the bohemian artist, right? Think about the beat poet with the black turtleneck and the beret. Like they were all about something. They were all about writing, and they were all about poetry, and they were all about, speaking out against the government, or, you know what I mean? But there was always something. There was always substance, right? There was always something there. But with the hipster, I feel like it was completely devoid of any kind of substance. It was vacant. It's just a thing to look cool. And I was always really confused by it until I'll tell you guys a story. And this is where my eyes started to get open and my suspicions, I think, were confirmed. So I had a teacher in art school. She was one of my animation professors. Her name was Linda. She was very cool. She was probably 15 years my senior. So if I was in my early 20s, she was probably 35, 36. And I knew she lived in the suburbs. She had a family. She was my animation professor for a bunch of different classes. I think she taught me animation, character design, storyboarding. And, we had a pretty close relationship through my schooling. And when I left school and I graduated, my colleague and one of my best friends, Colin, other Colin, I call him, stayed on and taught at my university for over 10 years, I think. So I would go back and visit, and I would lecture to some of his classes, a few times a year when he would ask. And he taught like advanced character design. He taught some other things, and I would go in and lecture. So I would see Linda from time to time. And one of the times I was lecturing for Colin's classes, she pulled me aside and said, "Look, I have a character design class at 3:00. Do you have time to talk to them?" And I said, "Sure. I'm going to go eat lunch with Colin after I talk to his class. I'll be back at like 2:30, and you could talk about what you could kind of brief me on what you want me to say to the kids and all that kind of stuff." Great. Came back, talked to her character design class. It was awesome. And then I hadn't seen her in a while, so we were catching up, and I knew her kids were like of college age already. And she was filling me in on the family happenings. And I was like, "Oh, how is your daughter?" And she was like, "Oh, she just moved to Oregon. And I was like, "Oh, is she going to school out there?" There's a couple of animation studios out there, Leica is out there and stuff. And she was like, No. She's just going out there, for fun. She's going to be a hipster." This was about 15 years ago. And I was like, "What?" And I knew Portland. I knew the reputation for the West Coast cities and all that kind of thing. But I was like, she's going out to be a hipster. What does that, what does that even mean? And she was like, "I have no idea." Now, if I was perplexed by it, right, somebody who is 15 years older than me must have really been in the dark, right? But I don't think I've ever really pursued it, but I have this bias that's kind of stuck in this mindset of like, I think what a hipster is just being cool because it's cool, right? Doing the thing, wearing the thing, drinking the thing, being in the neighborhood. That's the neighborhood to be in, the latest gentrified neighborhood or whatever. Without
with
any
your
of
fucking
that,
gastropubs around.
Yeah, gastropub. Yes.
I fucking hate that concept, man. Anyways.
like flavor of the month for anything, maybe even the music you listen to, I don't know, but there seems like there's nothing tied to it. Like we grew up and we knew the goth kids, we knew it was about the music. We knew the skateboarders, it was about the skateboarding. We knew the lacrosse kids, it was about the sport they played. You know what I mean? It was always tied to something. So there was always something there that there was an affiliation or something, some sort of bedrock, and then, the fit and the way you looked and the people you hung out with in the community kind of sprang out of that. But with the hipster, I just feel like it's completely devoid of anything that I can relate to. As I kick it over to you, Mike, I'm going to go ladies first on this one.
Oh, wow.
And you have this is the steepest generational divide between everybody that's here right now, between you and I, because we're 20 years apart. So I just want to know, is my definition correct? I read you the actual dictionary definition. Is that more in line with what it really is? And what's your perception? What's your experience? Am I in the right? Am I just kind of being a hater right now? Shed some light on this for me. I really need your perspective.
No, I think you got a lot of it right. One thing that pops up for me in terms of being a hipster is often the idea that once something does become popular is when they drop it.
Mm-hmm.
I think if everyone remembers when Moscow mules were suddenly really popular recently,
I do remember.
And it was a big thing. Everyone's drinking Moscow mules, and if you don't like them, well, you just don't get it, man. And it's like, but once mommy bloggers started talking about making Moscow mules at home, suddenly that's not cool anymore.
Yeah, that's not good.
We're off of Moscow mules, and that's a big part of it. I completely agree that a lot of being a hipster is doing things because it's cool. But I think part of it is you're on the cutting edge of it. You're liking this thing before it really takes off. You're superior to everyone else because you get it. And then once regular people are like, oh, that's nice. Oh, never mind. We're off of that. Or a big part of it for me is just, I think being a hipster involves a level of inconvenience that if you point that out, they'll tell you, well, you just don't understand. If you don't want to have a deconstructed cocktail where they serve you little shot glasses of the elements of a cocktail and you put it together yourself, well, you just don't get it, man. Like, you don't understand the art, the craft. And it's like, no, I want the bartender to make the drink because that's what I paid him to do. I don't want to make it myself. I don't want your deconstructed tacos. You know what that is? A taco bar. That's not new. That's not cool.
It's not exotic.
They're like, it's a deconstructed hamburger. And it's like, it's a fucking bun and a patty and toppings, and you're just putting it together yourself. And I'm like, what's cool about that? It's just a hamburger with several extra steps. And like, that's the type of stuff that I can't jive with, because it's like, nah, man, like you can't tell me that there's like a sophistication to making your own hamburger at a restaurant. I'll make it at home if I'm going to make my own burger, like make my own drinks. That's where it comes down to for me, is some of the absurdity of it. And they want to act like you just can't fathom it. You're below their level if you don't understand wanting to make your own old fashioned at the bar. And it's like, I could do that at home. I'm at a bar. So that's a big part of it for me. Avoiding being called a hipster is a big part of like, you never want to seem like one. And I have a very recent example. I have always liked writing, but it wasn't something I pursued because it didn't seem practical. But I want to get back into writing short stories. My favorite thing was writing short horror stories.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, thank you. So I've been reading some books on writing and just trying to read more in general and get back into this. I have all these ideas. And I recently just got a Facebook ad for what's essentially a more modern, word processor. It's a digital typewriter is the idea. And I just was like, that's really cool because the whole thing is distraction free. It only types. It has a little screen on it. All you can do is type your paper. It's modern in the way that it sends it to the cloud, or you can send it to Google Drive, or you can plug it into your computer and transfer your documents. But all it does is type. And their whole thing is that, studies have shown that when you get distracted, even if you don't click on the email, just seeing an email notification, it takes you about 20 minutes to refocus on the task at hand. So if you want to be, serious about, I want to really carve out time for writing, have a quality, half hour of writing without distraction, here's an idea. And people, I thought, like, that's really cool. I like the concept. People are like, that's so hipsterish, man. Like, all you need is a laptop on airplane mode. And I'm like, but the reality is that it is a good idea. It's like weirdly expensive. I'm not going to like say that it's not, because they have like a very niche market here. They're like the only people making this thing, right? It's like an upgraded like Alpha Smart. If you remember those keyboards with a tiny little screen on it, it's like a much more high-end version of that. But the idea being that this kind of doesn't exist otherwise. Like, sure, I could put my laptop on airplane mode and I can easily disable it as soon as I want to click on an app, because I just have, I got the itch. I get bored, right? So I can see the appeal of it. And the funny thing, though, is I think a lot of people would like this item, but they are just writing it off as like, it's so stupid. But you see tons of good reviews for it. You see tons of people saying this is genuinely a good idea. And then a ton of people be like, this is hipster shit. Just use a laptop. And it's like, I don't want to be called a hipster, but I want one, right?
You can
like
knock anything down to hipster.
Exactly. It's such an insult. It's like, I don't know how, you guys probably don't play Overwatch, but the audience will know. There's a classic thing where a teacher sent home a note with a kid because the kid got in trouble for calling somebody a Hanzo main. And the teacher wrote, they're like, I don't know what that means, but it was clearly an insult. And it's just one of those things of like, yeah, being called a hipster, even if you're like not completely sure of what they're implying, it's bad. And my first thought was like, I don't want to buy this thing. I don't want to be called a hipster. But the more good reviews I saw for it, I was like, this has a genuine purpose. But I almost didn't get one purely because I was like, hey man, that's not me. All right, I have a Carhartt jacket that's 15 years old. And I see these like girls wearing the Carhartt beanies and stuff. And they're like, oh, cute jacket. And it's like, this jacket's older than you are, sister. Like, I'm not wearing this because it's fashionable. I'm wearing it because it's cold. And I get very cold. But I don't know. I definitely, I don't like it. I don't like being labeled potentially a hipster just because I want some niche electronic product. All right. I just want a cool typewriter that doesn't distract me. But nonetheless, no, I think you got it spot on, Dagan. I have to add on the idea that being a hipster also involves inconvenience, and it also involves abandoning ship the minute that they think regular people have caught on to something.
Right.
Yeah. Suddenly it's not cool anymore. Like, and then we're off to the next thing, whatever that is. They're probably going to have deconstructed cotton candy, and you're standing at the cart with a little cone of paper and you're doing it yourself. That's going to be the next like hipster thing.
Well, let me delve into this though, right? Because I'm looking at it from my very old man perspective. And like, my big question is this, and maybe you guys can answer this. Where is the street cred? I mean, why are these people the test makers, the authorities? Where are the credentials? Where are the bona fides? Like when I was growing up, we admired let's say I'm taking it back to skateboarding because I know this world. We admired a skateboarder because they were good. So they were good at skateboarding, right? Or the guy that worked in the record store that knew literally he was like encyclopedic about punk rock. And he owned all the 7 inches or whatever. He had all the vinyls, right? Oh, and the 8 inches.
Yeah.
If he was lucky.
Yeah. If he was lucky. Yeah.
Right. But, where are the hours of practice? Where are the scars? Like, why are you making the rules? And what is this community where you don't want to be labeled this way, but you're clearly acting this way, where now it's gone deep enough into culture where we all know what this is. It's not a secret anymore. Maybe in the beginning, the hipster thing was a little more elusive and it was a little more, I don't know if I could get mixed up in that world. Maybe it's not for me, maybe it's a little intimidating, but now it's reached this pop culture crescendo where I think I understand it. And I guess what I'm saying is, why is it allowed? Like, who's listening?
So I think from my perspective, I think the hipster culture or whatever it is has died out. And because it's become such an insult that nobody wants to call it that. Now, here's how old the insult of hipster is. It was in Grand Theft Auto 5 in 2013. And I remember that scene because Michael, one of the main characters, was calling Trevor Phillips, the other main character, a hipster. And Trevor took great offense to that. And I found the whole conversation in Grand Theft Auto 5 in 2013 very, very tiresome because I was like, why is this in the game? This is already dated already in 2013. So I feel like beyond that, it's already. I think hipster has. Did you kind of hit on a point, Dagan, about why I think a hipster has been kind of gone away, because it's complete homogenization of culture, right? It's just there is no real drill down expertise on anything. Like whatever a hipster was it's just whatever is fucking cool. You know, they're listening to rap music, they're listening to punk rock music, they're playing the coolest games, or they're listening to the coolest music. If anything, you know, I feel like what Mike is talking about is really Silicon Valley, San Francisco culture, right? Where they're like, oh, we're onto this new little concept that people have already invented 20, 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, but we're rebranding it. And then now it's cool. And now it's just beneath your understanding or whatever. But I do think that the culture of the hipster with the mustache glasses and everything, the mustaches and the glasses have just been kind of filtered out. Which I'm very, very happy for. I'm very glad that we no longer are just fucking wearing monocles and driving around our fucking tricycles in the gentrified neighborhoods of whatever, you know. But I think for me, I have been a hipster to Micah's definition for many things. I always have liked the Strokes, the band The Strokes, before anybody else, before it became popular. I was listening to it before and I was like, oh man, this fucking band rules. And then it just became huge. And I was like, so I remember even before hipster was a thing, I was like, I liked the Strokes before they were big, you know? And I'm a total hipster for like FromSoft games because I've been, and I act that way too. Because I've been a fan of FromSoft games since the very beginning. And when Demon Souls came out, I was like, Demon Souls is it, man. Like Demon Souls is going to be the big thing. And like it kind of wasn't, but it became a big thing. Obviously, Demon Souls eventually became Elden Ring. But I'm a total hipster for Demon Souls and FromSoft games too. So I feel like that trait is always there, and it just unfortunately got rebranded by these white mustachioed people, mostly men. It's always men. I don't know. Do you know hipster girls?
Yeah,
That's
I knew.
a great point.
I did, but I'll get into
you
that when I
did
go.
call it because you came from the fucking heart of it, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
totally. That's what I'm going to get into.
For, you know?
That's what I'm going to get into. I was there. I was at ground zero, you know?
Yeah, you were ground zero for the hipster movement with all these fucking gentrified pubs and the gastro pubs, and you got to make your own fucking cocktails, and, you know, the beer never fucking tastes good, but, you know, like that's the appeal of it. You know, I prefer Bud Light. I used to be a real beer snob until until hipster culture came around and all these gentrified gastropubs came around, and I was like, "Fuck all this! Why am I paying $15 for a fucking beer? Give me a Bud Light." And then that's how I got addicted to like Bud Light specifically. One, because there's less calories, I guess, and then two, it's just cheaper, and I just prefer that taste. It just gets to the point of drinking beer, which is I'm trying to get drunk, you know.
It's funny. I knew that you couldn't really win in hipster culture when hipster culture claimed both Pabst and craft beer.
Exactly.
It's like, okay, so what the fuck am I
Yes.
supposed to do here? You know,
Yeah,
you got to go drink Yingling or something. Like that's your only choice, or
Right, somewhere in the middle.
yeah, whatever. It's like, okay,
Yingling's great though.
Well, I love Yingling too, and Yingling's doing really well now. That because like that's like a beer people are moving on to as they're moving up through Bud Light or whatever. That's like one of the beers people are reaching out to. Modelo's doing the best, of course, in that category, but. I lament that too because I love IPA. Like that's my favorite kind of beer. That has been my favorite kind of beer since, and I might have said this on one of the shows. I'm sure I have at some point that I discovered IPA in college accidentally because on St. Patrick's Day in 2005, I guess it would have been, my friend Kevin went to get all of us beers or whatever, and they were out of Guinness. So he just picked me up Harpoon, which for people that don't know is a Boston IPA. And I was like, all right, I guess he's like, it's like the darkest thing they had or whatever. And I fell in love with it. I just absolutely love Harpoon. I was actually just telling this to Micah's dad when they were here a couple weekends ago. He's like, what's your favorite beer? And I'm like, dude, I love Harpoon. Like that's the shit. And you can't find it down here really, unless you go to a distributor, which I don't. So I've always been mad about that because people are always like, oh, that you like IPAs like a fucking hipster. And I'm like, no, dude, I just really like drinking IPA. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to drink the IPA. And that also pissed me off with craft cocktails because I also loved craft cocktails. And that's I think way more legit hipster in some way because it's first of all way more expensive and it's way more sophisticated and all of that. But I just unironically love that world of walking into a bar like our friend Eric's bar. The dude has like a vest on. He makes you the best fucking old fashioned you ever had in your entire life. They hand carve the ice. It's totally unnecessary. Like I love that kind of shit. But
I love it too. God.
But
I love a good old fashioned.
If I might though, I think what we're talking about in some ways, and it mixes up a little bit with purism, I guess, in some way, which all right, so let me talk about San Francisco. I lived in San Francisco from 2007 to 2017. I would argue that is the most hipsterish era and probably the second most hipsterish city in the United States, with Portland being first. And if you've never been to Portland or experienced it, or just watch Portlandia because it's so accurate that it's actually scary. And that's what makes the show so fucking funny. That show is so funny. And it really takes the piss out of this sort of thing. But I know what a hipster is. And I know what a hipster girl is as well. But the thing that used to bother me, and this has kind of come up through this conversation with the others as you guys have gone, is I always got really annoyed when people would call me a hipster because I'm like, what am I? What? Because it's as you said, the definition. That's how I understood it too. It's like something that's countercultural but culturally relevant. That's cool. I'm like, what you're basically suggesting is that I'm cool. Or trying to be cool. And I'm like, I don't think so. I got my rap rock earrings in for 21 years now. And I wear the same clothes that I've basically always worn. I've been rocking Adidas shell toes since the new metal era. I don't think so. I think that's why I think it counters with this idea of purism, which I totally get much more. And this I totally fall into prey. And Dustin makes fun of me. I fall into this prey as well, where it's like, I won't play the third game in a series. It's like, oh, people are like, oh, you should play Yakuza, whatever. And I'm like, nah. It's like, if I'm going to play any Yakuza game, got to go back to the first one. Sorry. It's just,
I'm like you, Colin. Yeah. Like people always think that's weird, but it's like, I'm exactly like Colin. I'm not going to play part 3 if there's like that. That's why I've been talking to Micah about playing Octopath Traveler 2. It's like, I'm not playing part 2 until I play part 1.
I think that's
Gene,
which is crazy because apparently I gotta go right to 2, But
I played 2 without, which is a rare thing for me. I played 2 without having played 1, and I like it a lot, but I feel like there was something missing for me there too. With like, I don't know.
I get that.
To me, it really came. We're doing Alan Wake, an episode of Spoilercast on Alan Wake soon, the first one, which I just played. And I'm playing through it again right now as we speak, and on the hardest difficulty. And I really, really like that game. We're gonna have a whole lot to say about it, but it bothers me that Alan Wake 2 is going to come out in October and people are going to play that game straight up and not even play Alan Wake. And it's like, what the fuck are you doing? It was the same thing I felt with Final Fantasy VII Remake when that came out. And people were like, I'm just going to play that without having played Final Fantasy VII. I'm like, I don't understand what you're doing. It doesn't even make any sense.
Are these people not interested in like legacy and history and like the evolution of like art? I guess not.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, and certainly to each their own.
Guys, you're sounding like hipsters.
But no, that's what I was going to say. That's the kind of energy that people get, that hipster energy from me. And I'm like, fair enough, but that's not, I don't think it's cool in the zeitgeist to say like, oh, you have to play Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII came out when I was in 8th grade. So no, it's not cool literally to play Final Fantasy VII anymore. That's why I think people are conflating two different things. It's more, if you want to call me more of a gatekeeper or a purist, that's fine.
Sure.
I'll tell you. And by the way,
you're a gatekeeper for sure.
And by the way, we could go for a lot more gatekeeping. That could be a topic for another day, but we could go for a whole lot more of it. But in the meantime,
I want to say one thing.
Yeah,
I agree.
Okay. Yeah.
One of our biggest, like, and I mean lighthearted debates, because I'll call Colin a hipster in total jest, but he doesn't watch hockey as much anymore, right? And so when it comes for the playoffs, he'll be like, oh, I don't feel like I earned the right to root for them. And I'm like, you've been an Islanders fan your whole fucking life. Like, shut up. You're a busy man. You don't have time to watch 80 fucking games. That's fine. But to act like, oh, I don't have the right to root for them. It's like, what are you saying about me, man? I watched 20 Bruins games. That's all I had time for. It's all I could do. I'm still a biggest like fan, in the neighborhood. Obviously, it's like don't bring this on me that I'm not a big enough fan because I didn't watch every game. And
Yeah, I guess I'm not trying to insult you with that. It's just like my own standard.
Exactly, but it hits
like,
hipster as fuck.
But
and
I'll
it's
say
one
this,
of those
like,
things. I'm like, you can't do this to me.
Yeah, I will say this though. If I meet a Jets fan and I'm like, oh, so how many games you watch a year? And they're like, oh, I watch like half of them. I'm like, you're not a Jets fan. You're not a Jets fan.
My God, that's so stupid. The one he's like a heart surgeon and he's really
I don't know what
busy.
you are. You're maybe a passive Jets enjoyer.
He's a Jets fan.
He's a Jets enjoyer, but he's not a... Yeah.
He's a fan. He's probably a heart surgeon with 5 kids. And you're like, look, man, if you're not dedicating 3 hours a week to the Jets, you don't make the cut.
3 hours. That's the least you can dedicate to them. You got to be listening to the podcast. You got to be looking at the roster. You got to be doing all these sorts of things. So
this is where you're a hipster. It's a sports thing.
I totally understand that. But I guess to me, and this is what we're getting into, is that I just don't think that that's what hipsterism is. No, because
you don't want to be called a hipster.
Well, no, because I just told you could call me a purist or a gatekeeper.
Right, I led the topic.
It's much more negative to be called a gatekeeper.
No, the first thing I said though was that there's superiority to being a hipster, and that's what this is all about. So like, you can call it gatekeeping instead, but I already established that like my bar for hipsterism is thinking that there's like art, nuance, or like superiority to your actions versus mine, and that's like exactly what's happening.
Can I put it this way to you? Let me put it this way to you. Dagan will relate to this. When I was in college, I was so obsessed with the Yankees that I would watch literally every single game. It's 162 games a year. To watch them all. I had papers on my wall where I would write down the scores at the end of the game and all these different things. And that was a level of fandom wherein if someone had something to say to me about that Yankees lineup, I don't know that I would take them especially seriously unless they put that same level in. So that's all I'm saying. So that when I listen to the dudes that do the football podcasts that watch 10 times more football somehow than even I do, that's credibility. That's purism. That's not hipsterism. That's expertise.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Your level of like obsession with things is your own demon to deal with. And a normal person interacting with a fandom on a normal level is not like you're like, they're below me. Like, I don't need to hear from this person. It's like, yeah, but like, we're normal people.
I think you're internalized. This is a lot of projection. I'm not doing any of this.
No,
listen, like,
I think I get it.
I mean, if you had papers and statistics from the Yankees pasted up all over your wall, like the Zodiac Killer.
Yeah, I did.
All right, like
yeah.
Strings.
You'll meet Doug at the wedding. You can ask him because we lived together during this time.
Yeah, your level of your obsession with something does not mean that I'm not a fan. Just because you followed Mickey Mantle, from birth to the grave, doesn't mean that I'm not a fan.
No, I think, you know what? See, tell me if I could just arbitrate here. Yeah. Just tell me if you guys agree. I think I understand this from both perspectives. Yeah. I think. And I think it all comes down to authenticity, right? Because what Colin's saying is this. The Final Fantasy VII example is a good one, I think. Because you could say Final Fantasy VII Remake's coming out. I'm going to jump straight into that. From my perspective, that feels like you're just trying to play something that's the flavor of the minute because you want to be in on the conversation and the water cooler.
That's
talk
hipster.
Without paying the dues of being there for the original, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's just a take of being authentic. So I'm calling out your lack of your lack of authenticity for wanting to jump into the new one. Then that makes that person the hipster, not me. Right?
No, you're the hipster. Because if I want to play if I want to play Super Mario RPG, I don't own a fucking N64, and then yes, I don't own any of these old systems. So what? I'm supposed to go buy one or emulate the game so I can play the old one first?
Super Mario RPG was on the SNES first.
I'm not buying it. I don't have one. You don't have one.
Said that, Colin. I restrained myself.
I'm expressing the same. Energy.
I'm not gonna fucking buy some old system. I'm not gonna buy a PS2 to play Final Fantasy VII. If I want to play it, I'll play the new one. Spoiler. I don't want to play any of them.
I can't. I don't know if you're fucking with me at this point.
No, I know.
It's like I'm not gonna go play a wicked old game just to play the new one. I did play Witcher 2. Because it's the only way you can play it.
That's an example. I played Witcher 3. I played Witcher 3. Witcher
wasn't
3
gonna
is
get
an
out
example.
until
Fallout 3
360.
was another example where I didn't.
Oh, Fallout's
Yeah.
another one.
But
Oh yeah, you can't. You got to jump in with the new ones for some of these games. You really cannot go back. You can't. Witcher 1 is on PC only, and it sucks.
yeah,
Don't go
I
play
understand. I generally understand what you're saying, and I think that there are exceptions, but I'm trying to express that I just feel like it's more of I agree with you, Dagan, where the guy who plays Final Fantasy VII to be part of the zeitgeist is the hipster.
Yes.
No, if I play it because it's a new game.
No,
'cause
but
it's
maybe you
new,
genuinely
I just buy all the new games.
you're
If you're
genuinely
only-
interested. You're not the hipster.
If you're only hopping on Elden Ring now and you're like, oh, I love Souls-likes, then you're being a hipster because you're latching on to the latest thing because fucking Elden Ring sold 20 million and then now you're into this now.
I
know?
get that.
And you only played
I
one.
totally get it. Where it's like where I'm like I've been ride or die since fucking Demon Souls 2009. Nobody bought that shit at PS3 except for me and my friends. You know?
Yeah, Sony wouldn't even publish it.
Yeah, so yeah, even fucking Shuhei didn't get it, you know. So like that's where like my purism comes from, and it's funny, Colin, to hear you say this because like I feel like Colin, this gets Colin in trouble a lot, or it used to get Colin in trouble a lot. Or like I remember a tweet that he made where someone says, you know, I love playing games in easy mode, and then Colin was like, if you're a critic and you're playing a game in easy mode, then you don't really have much you're not really worth listening to. And then people decided to call Colin racist or sexist because of that, right? And where it's like when I saw that, I was like, I think Colin's just being kind of a gatekeeping asshole. That's it, you know.
Well,
that's really what it is. You know?
Well, it is in a sense, and that is gatekeepery. But that's, dude, people should be thankful that someone is saying that kind of stuff. What the fuck would you want to hear from a critic playing the game below the standard of difficulty that was intended? You should play it on normal. That's where you should play the game. I mean, that's just, there are so many people criticizing it in these reviews. Oh, I just don't even want to, I just can't even stand.
No, we can't get into that.
I can't get into it. What I will say is,
conversation.
What I will say is that I totally get, see, to me, I think there are examples of games, like individual games. So let's say like Dragon Quest would be a good example. I think even Final Fantasy is a good example, and other things where you could really just play them in whatever order you want. Dragon Quest games are loosely connected. Final Fantasy games are only connected when they have, you know, the subtitles and all of the rest. So people know how to navigate all of that. But I think that there are peculiarities with the way people handle certain games. And I think Alan Wake 2 would have been one of those. Like, what would you eat? Why would you even want to play this? And that was why I played it. Because I was like, well, I want to see what it's all about. And we can maybe get some content out of it, which we will. Mm-hmm. I do think that, and again, so I think that on the harshness scale, being called a gatekeeper is way harsher than a hipster. And I think it's fair to call me a gatekeeper. But I don't think it's fair to call me a hipster specifically because I think a few things. Number one, I think, and this goes back to the original hipsters of like the post-war era, zoot suits and shit like that, right? Mm-hmm. It's fashion. Hipsterism is really about fashion. And I never, ever, ever, ever looked the part. Like that was a major part of it to me being in San Francisco.
I don't know.
Super
he wears
skinny
Mackie
jeans.
Smackies.
Would you? Oh, Mac Weldon's. It's
you
like
wear $80 sweatpants. That's hipster as fuck.
They're so comfortable.
They are,
but
you get what you pay for.
But that's a niche thing.
No, Colin's right.
Very niche.
I think gatekeeper and hipster are actually opposites. I think that's the opposite. Gatekeeper comes with, you know, the bona fides of being that status, of being like day one, right? The opposite is of a hipster. It's just completely vapid. It's good. That's the thing. That's why hipsterism and hipsters can't last as we know it right now. It can't last, or it won't last, is because that glaring lack of self-awareness for liking something just because it's cool is way like that's just has a built-in expiration date. Everybody's going to call in your authenticity. You know, it's wreaked havoc though. I mean, I'm sorry. I don't mean to like denigrate a whole borough, and you know how much I love New York, but Brooklyn was built on this over the last 20 years.
Yeah,
and not just like Brooklyn, you know? Philly too. Philly has its own Brooklyn, Fishtown, Manayunk. I mean, there's whole neighborhoods that, and some ways good, right? Building new communities, but like it's pretty insane. And the other thing that you guys have me laughing at is look how defensive we are over it. Like we have to, right? Like I've been drinking Pabst Blue Ribbon since Archie Bunker. Like, you know what I mean? Like we have to claim like day one status. We have to claim like I was here first. You know, we're so defensive over it that it's actually kind of comedic, but it's changed pop culture because we don't want to be affiliated with being a fake. Mm-hmm. And and listen, maybe you're a hipster out there. Maybe you're a self-professed hipster. Maybe you're proud. I don't mean to throw you under the bus, but
No, we mean
there's
it.
just something so funny about it. You know what I mean? It's just completely, and maybe it is ironic. Maybe it's funny if you're just an unapologetic hipster, because then you don't care. You are out to be cool and, be, non-hipsters be damned. You could hate,
that's why it's just, I have struggled with this definition of the word cool. It reminds me of me playing Trails of Cold Steel, the role-playing game, right? There's a bunch of them, or these Falcom made games, and people are like, oh, you should just play this one or jump to this one. I'm like, no, I'm going to play the first one. And that's what I did. And then I'm waiting to play. And so I'm way, way, way behind. But I'm like, I don't understand how you can just jump so far. Why is that being hipsterish? That's weird. I don't even have any context for what you're talking about. I'm far behind. I'm paying respect. It's very similar. It ties into what you were saying, Micah, where when I used to be obsessed with the Yankees and was really, really into it, it was a lifestyle. And it's funny because what you're saying is true in the sense that when I couldn't pay attention to the Yankees anywhere close, when I got a job, basically, and I could no longer just watch the Yankees, especially being in California where the games would start often early at 4:00, right? So I'd be fucked. And I tried the first year or two that I was there and all of the rest. I kind of just fell out of it. I was like, I can't do this at all anymore because I can't do it to the extent that I want to do it. And therefore, it's a wash. Like I still look in the Yankees. I look at the standings multiple times a week, or I'll look, a box score, this and that. But it's just like, no, I'm not authentic anymore. I'm not. But I haven't missed a Jets game in, I don't even know, dude, years and years and years.
You have a very all or nothing sense of purism.
He certainly does. And because it's,
which I get.
Part of the insult to me, though, comes from you're not a real fan if you don't watch all the games. I don't get to watch half the Pats games because they're on at the same time as the Jets. Guess which game we watch? So it's like you're insulting me when I would watch that game.
This is what
I didn't have to watch that goddamn Zach Wilson throw another bean down the field. And I got to watch that for 3 hours when I could be watching Bill Belichick trying to make something happen. It's like, this is where it comes from. You can say it's not an insult to me, but it inherently is. If you're not a real fan unless you do this, and it's like, I literally can't.
No, I don't think that it's that. That's
the Sunday ticket.
I don't think that it's that. For me, it's not sufficient for my own personal taste. It's not. See, this is where the projection comes from. I'm not. No,
you literally said though, they're not real fans. You've said that to me. You're like, they didn't earn it. And it's like, okay.
Well, I'm keeping an eye. Dude, the Jets are going to be good this year.
We'll fucking see.
And I'm going to be keeping an eye out, about who's. There's no room on the bandwagon. There's none. No room.
No, the wheels done fell off 20 years ago. There ain't no room on that wagon.
Oh, dear. All right. Big, are you satisfied with the topic?
Yeah, I think you guys killed it. You guys absolutely. I think I'm responsible for teaching Colin this sort of dogmatic philosophy. Not with sports necessarily. A little bit we share that common thread with the Yankees, but yeah, I got that purism too. It is interesting though, the gatekeeping versus, just being a hipster or that. But I come out thinking they're opposites. I just do.
But that's the thing is that hipsterism claims them both, which makes it totally an inadequate descriptor. It's like the beer situation, right? You can't claim two sides of the spectrum and then have a worldview. That doesn't make any sense. So hipsterism is just, it's an insult. But it's never,
because again, it's just homogenous. It's just whatever. They don't really fucking stand or believe anything,
Like being a hipster is being in like a kickball league in Portland, right? Like an adult kickball league.
Yeah.
But that's almost not even hipster anymore. That's just kind of like a thing. Like I saw that in San Francisco, and then I'm sure it's in New York now. And
because some guy probably just really likes kickball.
Right.
Some guy's because honestly, I got called a hipster for buying an espresso machine, which is like a little pod espresso.
Yeah.
I just like it. But I'm like, I'm not a hipster. I just want to make coffee at home. I like it. It's cheap. I make a cup of coffee for like 80 cents. It's cheap as hell. It's like, what's hipsterish about wanting a cheap cup of coffee in my own house? But people would be like, anyone who owns one of those machines, hipster. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I just wanted a cheap coffee maker.
It's just a pejorative. That's what I'm saying. It's just a pejorative. And that's why I've been called a hipster so many times for my gaming takes or whatever that I'm like, I don't think that any of the game, I don't think I particularly have very cool gaming takes. In fact, I think a lot of people think my gaming tastes are suspect.
No.
They're bad.
They're not. It's not bad. I like it. I see things in games that sometimes other people don't see. But Well, that's for another day and another time.
Listen, I just want to say,
All right.
I was a hipster once. I thought about this and I forgot to mention it. I was in 7th grade. This is before I found an identity. And all I wanted to do, God, with every fiber of my being, I wanted to sit at that fucking cool kid's lunch table in the cafeteria. So I did everything they did. I had to get the gear. I got the Swatch. I got the Reeboks. I had to wear Ocean Pacific. It was all about the fit, right? I had to sit anything to just be with those kids. It wasn't about what I was into. It wasn't about anything deeper than just what I look like and could I be cool enough to sit with these kids for this 45
Poser.
minutes. I was a hipster. I was a complete hipster. That's a hipster, you know? I want to know, like, why can't maybe the hipsters will take it back and just own it and, you know, admit it, and it won't be they won't see it as an insult. That would be a kind of a cool twist in the hipster movement where they just kind of embrace it, you know? I don't know, but maybe it's not even a thing anymore. Maybe I'm late, but I should have had this conversation earlier. But I think I got some clarity and I got some generational perspective too, which is kind of good because, you know, let's face it, I'm old.
I feel like the hipster movement is over because I live in DC where there's just a fucking bunch of people who think they're so fucking cool, right? And I don't recognize the old indicators of hipsterism as I do here. And
Maybe
even
they're
when I
hiding in
get
plain
even when I hang
sight,
out in New
Ian.
York and Brooklyn, it's a little bit different.
It's different. All
Yeah,
right.
it's a little bit different. I mean, they're still into fucking coffee and tattoos and whatever like that. But I mean, that's just always been a thing, you know. So I do feel like this culture that's either being defined around it or even making fun of it has just kind of fallen by the wayside. Because I think, to your point, it's the authenticity that's what people really want. And being a hipster, you just can't really be authentic in anything, you know, because you're just trying to be cool and everything, and you're just trying to be everything. And maybe it's just not even knowing something before it was cool doesn't even feel that authentic anymore. And I think that probably goes back to what Colin is also saying too about the authenticity comes with the expertise and the experience of being exposed to certain topics or sports teams or genres of things, you know?
Yeah, knowledge. I mean, maybe they're hiding in plain sight. Now I'm worried. Like V, right? They're just gonna they forsook the they have completely forsaken the mustache wax and the pomade and the unicycles and the monocles.
I
and
had
they're
a
just
unicycle.
like they're completely incognito now.
I had a unicycle in middle school.
Mike is a real hipster here.
Listen,
no,
here,
it was just I wanted to be in the circus.
oh my God.
Okay, well, there you go.
You have a lot of nerve, dude. You have so much nerve.
Hey, I mean, wanting to bring joy to the faces of millions. I couldn't do it though. I had no balance. I should have realized that much sooner because I'm like the clumsiest kid ever, which is why I gave up skateboarding because I fell too many times. And my mom's like, they're going to call social services. You look all beat up. And it's because I was trying to skateboard. So I was like, well, how about a unicycle? And that was more dangerous. That was absolutely more dangerous.
You can't even ride a bike, can you?
That must be impossible.
I used to ride a bike. I can't anymore. I don't think.
I was like,
I don't think I
just
could
to
at
put you
this
right on
point.
a unicycle, like you're some sort
Well,
of
yeah, I
genius
could ride a
level
bike. I just
rider.
hit the house a couple times, you know. That's why I stopped riding it. I kept running into the house.
Listen,
Jake, I'll tell you what, I used to be a skater poser because I was not really in the culture until I started getting friends in it. And then, you know, I thought my friends were cool. And, you know, eventually I started spending all my days watching skate videos, you know.
That's
you know,
awesome.
legends like Day One Song and all those guys. Like, you know, Dagan, you know. But then
Legend.
eventually I started wearing the clothes and I actually got my own skateboard and I actually started skating 2 class. But then when I started doing tricks, I just couldn't do it and I didn't want to learn it. So I decided to be adjacent to the culture and become like a more skateboard photographer.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So like we would like jump the school fences and we would just my friends would be doing tricks and I'd just be taking photos of them and everything like that. So that was.
Did you film or just take
just
still
take photos?
That's awesome. So cool. That counts. That's okay. You're not a hipster.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll
I
accept
was
that.
beginning to be a poser and I got integrated into the culture in a way that I felt like actually made sense for me, you know?
Yeah.
And I also
what you
love
found
skate
a way
videos.
in?
Oh my fucking God. I miss those days, you know?
Oh, dude. That was such a rare, a skate video was an event.
Mhm.
You know, now everybody's got Instagrams. They got clips daily. The kids are so good.
Yeah,
But
no, we had to
looked
wait. We had to wait months for new skate
Months.
videos to come out. You know,
Months
now
and
it's just
months.
all over fucking Instagram. You know,
you have the freedom to play Final Fantasy VII Remake without playing Final Fantasy VII first. But if you do, keep your comments to yourself because no one's interested in what you think of them. What do you think of the game?
And you're a hipster.
And now Colin is racist and misogynist because he said that. You know, that's exactly how the discourse happens on social media. You know.
Oh, you
Yeah.
played the remake of the game you never played?
Well, yeah, you didn't see Tifa's boobs when they were triangles? Get fucked, man.
Yeah.
All right?
You wanted to see them hogs. Them hogs.
Them Allegheny hogs.
Them Allegheny. I haven't said that in a while.
Why Allegheny?
I don't know. Where did that show come from? I was called
because there was a video of a fight in Allegheny and a woman's boob came out.
yeah, and I called them and I say that she had them Allegheny hogs.
I think Colin probably sent that to me.
Yeah, I probably did. I'm always thinking of you as I'm watching my fight videos. All right, my friends, let's close with a. Oh, by the way, speaking of hipster, I got these in the mail today. My cufflinks
Oh, nice.
Very cool.
for the
Very cool.
for the wedding. Yes, it's getting a little. Like I was saying, the logo is just really getting. It's getting a little crazy around here. The logo. All right, my friends, let's close with something light. I wanted to just know when push comes to shove, what's your favorite game controller? The best game controller that you can think of. This is a tough question because I think you can answer it from many different ways, many different perspectives. But I'm curious when you think about it with your gut, what's your favorite? And if you want to throw in there a couple favorites, a few favorites, and maybe even your least favorite, I'd love to hear more. What I think I want to say at the top, and I'll share with you what I think at the end, but is that I think that there are not that many bad controllers, just really bad controllers. I think most of the controllers are so over-tested that they often fit most people, and there have been very few misses in this regard. So it's really going to be about personal taste, I think, and I'm curious to see what everyone thinks. Gene, I want to hear from you first. When I ask you your favorite video game controller, what comes to mind?
Easy one. Well, first of all, you're right in that there's really a bad controller. Even Stadia's controller was fucking good. Stadia,
Oh,
you know, but when you picked it up, it felt really good in the hand. But this is an easy question. It's the Xbox 360 controller. That for me is ergonomically, it's like, you know how they mold fucking like pocket pussies out of like people's pussies or whatever like that. Like I felt like that they molded like the Xbox 360 around my fingers, and like it just fits like perfectly. You know? I'm sorry for the analogy, but that's what I was thinking.
That's just what's on your mind.
Yeah.
That's
It just feels perfectly, and I miss it. And I don't even like the Xbox One or even the Xbox Series controllers as much. It just felt right. It just felt it had all the stuff. It had the little cool little home button, the X, but I just like the ergonomics of it all. Just the way it fits, and you know the military is still using it. You know, that's how fucking good the controller is. That the Army, the Marines, the British Special Services, they're using it for their tanks and submarines and everything like that. You know, that's what Ocean Gate should have used. Maybe.
Yeah, Ocean Gate was using that Circuit City 999.
the leapfrog controller.
Yeah,
The one that they got from fucking Radio Shack or whatever. You know? So I mean, like that's just immediately what comes to mind. I miss it. I wish I could still use it. I'm thinking about just getting one just to keep using it for the PC. You know, just to play on the PC. I think after that it would be the DualShock 4. The PS4's controller. I don't like the DualSense. Not that I hate it, and I think that it's awesome. But I feel like the DualSense is just a little bit too wide in terms of my fingers. So I got to reach a little. My thumbs have got to reach a little bit more, and it's so fucking heavy because it's got all this haptics and shit like that. And I just don't want to deal with that. That's why the PS4 controller is light. It's got the ergonomics. It's got all the buttons you need. The touchpad. I love the touchpad too. I still love it on the DualSense too. I wish more games would take advantage of the touchpad. That's why playing a Sony exclusive is so great, because like they you know, Ghost of Tsushima, Last of Us, you know, all those games just use the touchpad so perfectly. And yeah, so that's why I kind of wish the PS4 controller would kind of come back too. I think you can play PS4 games on the PS5 with it. I just haven't tried yet. But sometimes
you can.
Yeah, you can. But that's why I still have my PS4 plugged in, because sometimes I just want to play an older game, and I just would rather play it on that controller. I played all of Resident Evil 4 remake on the PS4 because I just figured, I just figured that I might enjoy the controller more, and I did. I had fun because I was playing Resident Evil 4 again. So you know, whatever. But that's, to me, are the best ones. The Switch Pro Controller is pretty good too. I like that there's no travel with the triggers, which it's kind of annoying for certain shooters. But you know, if you're not playing shooters, then there's not really much of a deal. I do miss the PS3 controller and the way it had like analogs on the buttons. I think what was it, the PS3 or PS2?
PS2 was the one.
PS2?
Yeah, it was PS2 that had the like, because you could use them in Metal Gear Solid and stuff to shoot.
Metal Gear Solid, yeah, dude. Fuck, dude.
Two,
like,
Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3.
Yeah, Metal Gear Solid 2. I missed that. I feel like the PS2 DualShock really had it right, and the PS4 is an evolution of that. But like, it really just started with the PS2 and how that felt. And then I got my hands on the 360, and I was like, oh, this is just perfect. It's part of the reason why I feel like the 360 was my most played console of that generation, at least up until the point they stopped fucking releasing games for it. and then the PS3 got really good, and then I started to enjoy the DualShock there. But you know, the DualShock there was really just an evolution of the PS2 DualShock. You know, so yeah, that's all I got to say.
Cool, man. Those are good answers. Micah, what do you think when you are asked this question? What's your favorite controller or controllers?
All right, favorite controller, because I have it right here. This controller doesn't work anymore. It's my prized possession, which is the Xbox One Titanfall controller. All right. Now, this specific one I just like very much because I adored Titanfall. This is one of my like favorite multiplayer games ever. It was incredible. The Xbox 360 controller, definitely a shout out to that. Back in the day, Gene had the chat pad on there. You know, message to all friends. You're typing as fast as you can. I always loved Xbox for my multiplayer games because I much prefer the offset sticks. If I'm playing Call of Duty or if I'm playing Gears of War online, I just feel very uncomfortable using the PlayStation controller. The side-by-side sticks, it just hurts my hands. I don't like it.
Me too.
Maybe it's just because I'm so used to the Xbox controllers, but I still just don't enjoy playing shooters specifically. Like, I couldn't play anything competitive on PlayStation. Like, Call of Duty has to be on Xbox for me. That controller is the most comfortable. It's the one that I just like the best. And yeah, the newest, Xbox, series controllers, I like those too. I don't think there's not like a huge difference in like feel in the hand from this one to those. But I need it to be an Xbox controller. The weight is right. The offset sticks, the buttons, they get, hate for some of their D-pad decisions. I mean, it really depends what you're playing, though, if we're even using that in the first place. Because I'm primarily talking about first-person shooters and all that. And if I'm trying to be competitive online, it's got to be an Xbox controller. I will say definitely...
Nobody plays fighting games on Xbox. That's why the fighting game community is so tiny on Xbox.
Well, right, because Killer Instinct, when they tried to bring that back, and I mean, it looked really cool, but people are like, this is not the place for fighting games, man. The D-pad's horrible. Everyone knows that. They're wiggly as shit. But it's completely dependent on what type of game you're playing. I agree with Gene. The Switch, Pro controller, excellent. Really comfortable. It's almost a little too lightweight, but if you compare it to the Wii U Pro controller, you really feel the quality because the Wii U Pro controller was light as a feather. It felt like a McDonald's toy. And it was still an improvement over the gamepad.
Yeah, seriously.
But it really was just like completely too light. The Switch Pro controller improved on that in many ways. But yeah, Xbox controllers are always going to be my favorite unless they made some colossal change. I'm always going to prefer these. The PlayStation controllers, the newer one especially, it's really heavy. And I admit, like, I'm not the target audience probably for PlayStation, but it is a really heavy controller for a 5'4" woman, with small hands. It's just not a comfortable experience for me to try and play extended periods of time on that console. So Xbox always for me is going to be my happy place in terms of that controller. That feel.
By the way, I just thought it was funny. Oh, he's not standing anywhere. He was just standing with his face facing the door, like he's like, I'm ready to go now.
Blair Witch.
Yeah, exactly. Dig, what about you? What comes to mind for you when I ask you what your favorite controller is? Or
all right, you guys, I brought props. I came prepared.
Oh.
Let me reach over here. I'm gonna go a little older school for you guys. I'll start with the bad news, and then we'll go to the good news. This one. And I'm not going to harp on this. I know how much people know already that I hate the N64. This baby right here, I'm gonna throw it.
Is that one of
I'll throw
is
it
that one of
out the
mine?
window right now. No, so this is not the actual N64 controller. This is a USB version.
Oh, okay.
But it's a cheap approximation. But I have it, and it's fresh on my mind because our friend Pat Contry, retro video game YouTuber, I worked on all of his guidebooks, starting with the NES guidebook, working to the SNES guidebook, and most recently the N64 book, which I think still won't be out for like another 6 months. But I worked on a bunch of N64 games, tortured myself, and it only drives the point home that this is the fucking worst
That
controller
controller sucks.
in the world.
Awful.
And you know why? This plays into the good news, because you can't follow this precious,
Oh yeah, Super
precious
Famicom.
darling with this piece of garbage. Now look, I'm going to give it a kiss. Super Famicom controller. I'll settle for the North American purple button version, but look, if you could get the colorful rainbow
Yeah, why
button,
did they
look at
change
that
that?
click.
They must have wanted it to be more of like a living room thing or something, right?
Yeah, they wanted to skew a little older.
Yeah, I think so.
Right, but you
Yeah.
need the colorful.
Yeah, this was Super Nintendo when it was like play it loud days, right?
Yeah, right,
yes.
right.
They were trying to like adultify.
Yeah, like MTV commercials and stuff.
Can you imagine this going up against the Genesis? Like it was already kind of, you know what I mean? Even as a late teens, I already felt like this was the kid toy with the purple buttons, let alone. But now I need the candy buttons.
Yeah, I agree.
Listen, if you're not man enough to play a Super Famicom, at least use the controller with your Super Nintendo. You could get these. They're all over the place. Listen to these shoulder buttons. Listen to them.
So
Listen to
squishy
the
and
click.
nice, you know. The shoulder
I'm gonna
buttons
tell you
is just a bit
something.
innovation.
Yeah, it was awesome. They barely used them too. You know,
So comfy. And listen, this followed I would still say one of the best controllers in the NES controller. That's a good controller. This made the NES controller feel like shit. I think about being like a driver, like a driving aficionado. I think about once you get that Alcantara steering wheel, you don't want to go back to the pleather, right? You don't want to go back to the cheap plastic. That's what this baby is. And I think my second nod would be, I agree with Gene, the PS4 controller. If I'm talking about things more contemporary, I spent a lot of time with that controller because of Knockback. I have Knockback to thank for that. But this baby right here is just, for me, you know, this is my whole heart. I'm going to put it in my shirt where my heart goes.
Here's the PS4 controller with the back button.
yeah, there it is. Yeah, you
I
got the
mean-
triggers. Nice.
Yeah, love it.
That's too advanced for me. I can never relearn how to. I've learned all I know about controls, and I'm never going to be able to learn anything else about them. So I can't add anything to my controller because I will just confuse me too much. All right, I like everyone's answers.
Good for playing for first-person shooters, and like I just like kill people in Fortnite with that shit. Because I
Yeah,
can just-
Dustin's
I can
mega
shoot
into
can't do
his
it.
his edge or whatever, and he has that back button thing, and he's crazy about it. So I think he said he even used it in like Elden Ring, stuff like that.
Yeah, Elden Ring is perfect because then you got to be running and also like keeping target on your thing, and then you have to hold run, which is circle or X or whatever, I forget.
Yeah,
But one of the phase buttons,
interesting.
and it's just nice to be able to just run and just still move the analog sticks around. So
I have to try that.
you know when you've used your controller a lot when the thing's just wiping off on the back. The barcode.
Nice.
I love this
Yeah.
though. This is my Islanders color controller. And I have my Jets controller too, but I actually sent that to Ramon. I sent Ramon my PS4 Pro, 2 controllers and $100 bill, so he'd buy PlayStation Plus Extra. And then,
Nice.
and I'm like, oh my god, you're gonna be like a pig in shit, my friend. So for me, I have a few answers, I guess. I think ergonomically, like the most comfortable controller, in my opinion, is the GameCube controller. And
yeah,
I remember getting GameCube a senior in high school and holding that controller and being like, wow, this thing actually fits my specific hands totally perfectly. And it was so funny because Xbox came out around the same time. I didn't get my Xbox until 2 years later, but a bunch of my friends had their Xboxes. And I remember holding the Duke controller and be like, oh my God, like you put them next to each other. It was comical. This Duke controller is so huge. I didn't hate the Duke controller like a lot of people did, but it was ridiculous. It felt very It felt kind of like the Atari Jaguar controller, where there were just more buttons on it. And it was kind of cooler and more sophisticated. But nonetheless, they came out with the S controller or whatever that was. By the time I got my
Duke
Xbox
controller, because then we were all playing Halo, and it felt more like a gun that you were holding. There
was a lot of dead space on it, which I understand, but I don't know. I had no problem with it. But so ergonomically, I would say the GameCube controller was my favorite. It's just not a very conventional controller, even for that time period. It was very weird. for that time period. But I loved that controller. And I wanted to give a shout out and a nod to a controller that I thought was very special and interesting, although easy to break, which was the Dreamcast controller. I loved the Dreamcast controller. It was really unique and interesting. And our friend PJ, who listens to the show sometimes, will know he used to break when we used to all break Dreamcast controllers often, just not for any other reason than they would really wear out when you would play Crazy Taxi or Soul Cal or whatever, if you were using the triggers a lot, Power Stone, games like that.
Yeah.
But I loved the little memory card unit that you would put into it and all. It was very futuristic, the Dreamcast controller. But my favorite controller of all time is probably the NES controller. And maybe if you really wanted to get it down to brass tacks, you would go to the Dogbone second, version 2 controller from the top loader. But just, it's perfect for just very specific games. Like it's all you need for Castlevania. It's all you need for Mega Man. It's all you need for Ninja Gaiden. It's all you need for DuckTales. It's all you need for all those games. Even the original Zelda 2. You weren't really in want of more buttons. And it's interesting when you think about that was kind of a conventional piece of wisdom. Think about the Genesis 1989. It's only 3 buttons.
Yeah.
Right. They didn't really feel like they needed to add very much more. In fact, it's the same amount of buttons because they didn't have a select button. They had a start button. So it was literally the same amount of buttons as the NES controller. Right. It wasn't until the SNES controller, you had 4-face buttons, you had the triggers. And like I was saying earlier, there were games that used those triggers, but not very many of the games I cared about used them. To be honest, it was well ahead of its time in that regard as well. So I just love
in Final Fantasy. It was a good way to do select all, right? If I recall.
I think that's right.
Final Fantasy games, you can press L and it'll be like,
right, yeah, that's right, and for 4 and 6, totally. So it was interesting. Like I think about just jamming away on that thing, playing Mario 3 or something. It's like, damn, dude, you just don't need anything more, and that's what frustrates me so much about the Wii. The Wiimote was awesome, by the way, for sideways virtual console gaming or whatever. It was dope. It was perfect. It was really perfect. Playing Mega Man 9, Mega Man 10. Whatever on that Final Fantasy, the After Years or whatever the fuck random shit I was playing on WiiWare, that all worked out. But otherwise, they've really missed the ball, in my opinion, in the virtual console space since, so I guess Wii, where when I played Ocarina of Time, for instance, on Wii or on Switch rather, it really stood out. It's like, why is everything backwards on these controllers? The buttons don't naturally make sense when you start the games up. Why doesn't this bother anyone? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Like the buttons are not where they're supposed to be. And it's I guess at some point along the way, I dropped out of Nintendo during the Wii era. So this happened sometime after this, where at some point they were just like, no, these buttons don't mean what they used to mean anymore. It's like, okay. So when you pick up the SNES controller and it doesn't lay over the Switch controller unless you move the buttons around. And the NES controller buttons are like along this vertical instead of this vertical. So they're not where they're supposed to be. I don't understand why that doesn't bother the shit out of people. Oh my God, that would bother me so much, to the point where you have to redo the whole button mapping at the system level. And then I have to reset that whole, and I do. And then I have to reset the whole thing so that it goes back so Micah can use it again, because I don't know how to use it otherwise.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I watched Colin fiddle with that controller for 45 minutes to get the buttons set the way he wanted them. Because he was like, it just doesn't play right. And I'm like, just play it the way it is. A to do this and B to do that. He's like, I can't. And he spent like 45 minutes tinkering.
For people who have been playing games as long as us, it's like asking us to drive at the other side of the road. Like we just can't. Yeah.
The muscle memory is all off. The great example, I've brought this up many times, so I don't mean to be redundant, but the great example is when the Mega Man collection came to PS2 and GameCube back in 2003 or 2004, whenever it was. The GameCube version of the game is famously unplayable, because the buttons are mapped in the wrong direction. And the only people who would play Mega Man like that are people who have never played Mega Man before. You simply could not play it. I remember that clear as day. Like, that was the version where people were like, no, don't buy that version. Like, that version's fucked. You got to buy the PS2 version. And so that's what I was saying about the back triggers too, where I just don't think I can learn how to use those incorporate that into my repertoire. It was like when when Xbox introduced the white and black buttons, or the touchpad. You got to do it slowly for me. I'm not that smart. You got to indoctrinate me slowly. So yeah, I think I would give a shout out as far as just jamming away on the NES controller ergonomics. I would give it to the GameCube controller. The PS4 controller is great. I think the PS4 controller is the best Sony controller. The PS3 controller, probably 6-axis specifically, is the worst, I would say. And the PS5 controller is just a little too big and broad. And sadly, I don't know if I've identified it as just aging, Colin, or if it's specific to this controller where my hands are starting to hurt in weird ways when I play PS5. And it's like, I don't know certain games. I don't know if you've experienced this, Gene. God of War really brought it out in me because you're constantly tapping the triggers, and the triggers are heavy. And most recently, Immortals of Avium, which no one played but me, but that game hurt my hands in the exact same way because you're constantly using the triggers like that. And I'm like, there's something about this that's making my hand stretch, and it hurts up here. And but it's like a real pain. I'm like, oh man, am I just getting arthritis from just years of playing games, or is it this specific controller? I think it's the specific controller. Like the form factor of the PS4 controller is much better.
Yeah, I don't feel the pain when I play like Switch for like hours and hours, and like I kind of feel it on the Xbox One controllers, which is why I'm not like a huge fan of like the biggest fan of the series controllers in the One controller, because it still feels not quite right. And the Switch controller right now out of all the generations is my favorite one. Because it's the only one that doesn't make me feel like painful. But the PS5 one, definitely. I don't know. I'm with you, Colin. I don't know if it's age or not, but my comfort level with the Switch tells me that it might just be the design of both the Series and DualSense controllers.
Yeah, you might be right. It's something for them to keep an eye out on. I wonder if they collect that kind of information or if it's just anecdotal or whatever. Because there's just so many different things that happen to controllers. Famously, remember when the DualShock 4 came out, the sticks would unwind for people. And I'm like, what are you doing to your controllers? I never got that even remotely. I play so many video games. I'm like, what are you doing? So I think there are some things that they just don't test for, but the way that your hand is clenched in that position and then using the triggers, it's doing something to me, man. It really hurts.
You got to watch that.
Yeah.
And the Edge itself is so fucking heavy because it's got all this hardware inside it. So like even though I like the back buttons in the Edge, I actually don't use this controller that often because it's so heavy.
Because it's fucking 25 pounds. Yeah, it's
heavy.
It's when I drop my DualSense controller, which I do fairly often, unfortunately, on the hardwood floor. It's like, Jesus Christ, dude, this thing.
It's so loud.
It just feels like, how is this not broken now?
It's like a fucking bowling ball.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, yeah, I just thought I would end with something easy and breezy like that. Just get your guys' guttural takes. Dig, I loved your answer for the worst controller, the N64. I think that's an easy answer. I gotta say though, I think the Genesis controller was pretty insufficient. Not the 6-button Genesis controller, or when they added triggers, but to that original 3-button controller wasn't great. I like the Master System controller. Actually, it's totally fine to me.
Yeah, that one's okay.
So yeah, but there's really nothing bad. The N64 is the worst it got, I think, just because I remember getting the N64 and not even understanding how you were really supposed to hold it. I wanted to hold it like this, and you have to hold it asymmetrically. But you don't know that when you it's like, what are you doing? Like, I want to play like this.
Hold it like that.
Yeah, you have to hold it like this. If you hand
it to someone, they won't know what to do. They won't know where to grab it. You hand that to somebody, they're like, what is it?
Yeah, you're like this, and you're trying to do the analog stick this way.
What a departure, right, from just the little SNES controller. It was a huge jump.
Yeah. I do blame the N64 controller and Mario 64 specifically for training me. We want to talk back about muscle memory, for training me for being an inverted player, because I can't play any game. If the game doesn't come inverted with inverted camera, then I might not play it.
Yeah, I can't play it without inversion. That's not an option for me either. I invert Y totally.
Invert Y all the time.
Yeah, I remember playing Zelda at E3 on Wii U, and they didn't build Y-axis into it yet. So you just had to play it standard, and I was like, I had an appointment, and I'm like, I can't play this.
That was Skyward Sword?
No, that must have been Twilight. No, not Princess. Twilight Princess. Breath of the Wild, probably. But like an early,
sure,
before they showed off the Switch. So this was probably 2015, 2016, something like that. But I remember that very clearly because I was like, what? Like I can't play like this. So it was really a waste and a bummer. But I'm with you completely. And we went into that on a recent episode. I don't remember what it was. Were you on that episode about why we play like this? That must have been on Sacred.
I heard it. Yeah. So this was my chance to talk about it.
Oh, very good. Very good. I didn't know. Yeah. Solidarity, brother.
Yeah.
All right, my friends, let's go around the horn and say goodbye to everyone. Gene, goodbye to you, my friend. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Yeah, no problem. This was a wacky and fun episode. We covered a lot of emotions and a lot of history and a lot of topics. In more than just 4 topics that we covered here. So, yeah, I think this was a special one. So good job, everyone.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate it. Micah, thanks for taking the time to talk to us today. Appreciate you.
Certainly, this was a fun one. One more thing I gotta say, the Wiimote, that was the top tier controller for throwing it through a TV.
Yeah.
The shape of that controller, you whip that thing, it's going straight through your flat screen. No other controller could do it.
It's a missile.
Did they realize that? Did they do the restrict? I gotta remember, man. I have so much gaming news in my head. Like didn't they figure out the wrist strap stuff afterwards, where they started sending them for free or something like that? Or
I wore mine religiously. I would not play that game without the wrist strap on. It didn't matter what I was playing.
That. There's something about the wrist strap and them coming to a like having some lawsuit or something. I don't know. I got to go look at it.
I forget, but I think that's why every game has like a fucking warning.
Right. That might be what it was. Yeah. And then it came with the condom. Remember, everyone had they called it the Wiimote condom.
Yeah, I mean that's like the real pocket pussy right there.
Yeah, my Riley Reid Wiimote condom.
Riley Reid.
Dig.
I did not expect that reference from Micah.
Yeah,
that was interesting.
She's the cock ring king. That's her name. That's her name on Reddit, by the way. Is cock ring king.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's also my name on Twitch. Yeah, if you see me lurking in like Chris or Dustin's chat, that's me.
Dig, goodbye to you, my friend.
Goodbye, you guys. Thank you for distracting me. I'm dry. First of all, this is the most edible control. I just want to bite it.
Yeah.
So delicious.
It's a Willy Wonka treat.
Speaking of Brooklyn, I have to drive to Brooklyn on Sunday. It's like all I could think about. It's like haunting me.
Why do you have to go there?
Taking Lilia and her best friend to a concert.
Oh, at Barclays?
No, it's somewhere at like a pretty small venue in, I don't even know exactly where, like Red Hook or something.
Who's playing?
And Brooklyn's really like put me in Manhattan, that's fine. Like I spent plenty of time in Manhattan. I worked there for years, but Brooklyn, I spent really very few time, very little time in Brooklyn, very intimidated by Brooklyn. And it's kind of difficult to get to from this side too. It's not the easiest thing to get to Brooklyn from here. So just going over routes in my head and which way am I going to go? Am I going to take the bridge over? Am I going to go through Jersey City? Maybe stop and see Cog?
Yeah, go see Cog. Yeah, wing it, my friend. See what happens. Who are you seeing?
It's going to be an
Who
adventure.
is the person? Who's the act?
She's going to see Alex Page.
I don't even know who that is.
Lilia's got this crazy... I predict you guys will know who she is in like a year. She's got this crazy knack for seeing like these people when they're small and then they blow up. She did it with Gracie Abrams. She saw Gracie Abrams 2 years ago at this small little venue. She opened for Taylor Swift in the spring.
So you would say that
I think she did it with Phoebe Bridgers.
She's a hipster. Yeah, she's just a hipster. You're
She's a hipster. She's a total hipster. So
yeah, fair enough. Well, have fun. We're gonna Micah and I are going with some family members to see Gin Blossoms tomorrow.
Oh wow!
That's awesome.
Yeah, play with
my first concert.
Yeah, Micah's never been to a concert, which is funny, so that'll be awesome.
What, really?
Yeah, and Sugar Ray's opening.
Come on.
Yeah, and
what?
And then a couple other bands that I liked from the '90s, Tonic and Fastball. So
I
really,
love Fastball, dude.
Yeah.
I used to do Fastball covers all the time.
Sugar Ray. Who's the lead singer?
Mark
McGrath.
Yeah.
He does something else, right?
Yeah,
he's known for something.
He's done
else.
like a lot of like he did I remember he did the comeback of like Name That Tune or some random stuff, but he hosts like Extra or one of those random shows. But
I like that guy.
People, I brought it up a couple times that I'm going to see them. People have brought up the famous Mark McGrath video when it's probably 20 years old now. It's like pre-internet video of someone screaming at him in Hollywood, like, "Hey, Sugar Gay." And then he like goes and confronts the dude. And he's like, "Yeah, you think that's funny or whatever?" And people like always circulate that video. You can definitely find it. Go look it up. You'll find it.
You were talking about Sugar Ray recently, and I'm like, I fucking love Sugar Ray.
Oh, I love Sugar Ray too. Those first,
they were like my favorite band for like a while.
The first three, they were like a little bit new metalish in the beginning, which was cool. Like when Fly came out, that whole record, that second record was still kind of new metal, but I actually like the softer 1459 and then the self-titled record or whatever. I like Sugar. I've always liked Sugar Ray.
I learned how to play all those fucking songs someday, every morning.
Oh yeah, every word is like dee nee 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 nee. Yeah, that's a fun one to play on guitar. I know that. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. I love the Gin Blossoms. Like straight up love the Gin Blossoms. Those two Gin Blossoms records from the 90s are so good. Oh boy, it's gonna be good. I'm gonna be going.
Yeah, Micah, you're gonna have a very 90s time.
Yeah.
Over the
I mean,
weekend.
every day is a very 90s time living with Colin, which is great. I enjoy it, but this is what we listen to 24/7. Colin has his hour workout every day where he plays all his favorite music, and it is quite a hodgepodge of 80s and 90s. It's great. But yeah, I'm very excited for my first concert ever. It's going to be quite the experience.
Yeah, it's gonna be good.
Yeah,
It should be a nice day.
Music Stelly soon. We'll do that next time.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny you say that because I was talking to Ramon, who's been on the show, who everyone knows is my best friend. He's
Yeah.
a musician, and I was talking to him about how I want to do a new metal topic because he and I grew up loving new metal, and then he kind of has sworn it off, like that he can't stand it anymore, and I find that quite offensive because that's like our heritage, you know.
Mhm.
And he wanted to do a topic about the Richmond, north of Richmond guy, the folk singer.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, we should get. So it's interesting to know that it's good to know you want to do that. So maybe you can be the fourth chair for that, and we'll do a whole musical show. We can have all musical topics.
Yeah,
And
for
that's
sure.
cool.
I still love new metal too. So
Me too,
you
dude.
know.
I love him. I unironically, I'll listen to Korn right now, like
Dude,
on
I
the
fucking
show.
love Korn. Korn
Don't
was
do
like
it.
above Nirvana for a little bit for me, you know.
Yeah, Korn is. The way it's all settled is I'd probably put Nirvana ahead of Korn, but Korn was more important to me when I was younger, for sure.
Yeah. And Jonathan Davis has got such a great voice. Like I would put him alongside the Tool singer, you know.
Oh,
and one of the
Maynard?
great,
Yeah.
just Peter Maynard with just one of the greatest metal singers, one of the most unique voices out there. Anyways, stay tuned for Stelly.
Yeah. We'll definitely we'll tune that up. We'll get that going. We'll cue that up, and it'll be fun. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate you guys. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support. Remember, early ad-free access and more on Patreon. Patreon.com/LastStandMedia. Couldn't do without you there. Merch. LastStandMedia.store. Free shipping on all stickers here in these United States. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye. Constellation is a product of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show was conceived by and is directed and hosted by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is my brother, Dagan Moriarty. The show is produced by Last Stand's executive producer, Dustin Furman, and is edited by associate producer, Ben Smith. All Last Stand theme music is by Ramon Narvaez, and all of our graphics and logos are by Dagan Moriarty. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's podcasts, including Constellation, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest support tier, and we're infinitely grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor.